We want the audience to come with an open mind, ready for something completely new.
This is the most intimate setting we could create to showcase our album exactly as we intended.
It's the kind of show that will take everyone by surprise.
We have been conceptualizing and putting together a 3D, 360-degree binaural headphone concert, which is a mouthful, so we call it immersion. And it's essentially a headphone concert that brings in new technology to create a very immersive sound mix, so you can place audio in full 360-degree spectrum.
A typical headphone show would just be a mix through microphones and the band and everything, and then instead of like your outputs going to speakers, then it would go to headphones. With binaural audio, you can treat the audio so it sounds like it's coming from all around your head. So I could play something like 50 feet this way and down and off axis.
What's unique and impressive about this project is that we're processing live instruments in real time. So it's not premeditated in the same sense that it's like curated and planned. This is taking something that is happening in real time, processing it in under 10 milliseconds so you can't hear any latency, and then giving it to the audience. So all this to say, it's putting the audience in the center of the music and allowing the music to really engulf them. Kellen and I were in the front seat of our band van driving home from Toronto. We were talking about wanting to do something unique to promote the new record. So we sort of dreamt up this idea of like, oh, what if we do like a listening party? We sit them down, we give them headphones, and we click play on the record. And that was like, oh, that could be cool. Like we can invite our friends out. It would probably be pretty cozy. And then we thought, wait, why don't we play our new record live and do the same thing with headphones? Out of a desire to do something different, we then pursued the 3D idea, which for a long time was just a theory. The deeper we researched, and by the time we got in contact with the right people, we're like, whoa, this can actually happen. We should go for it.
Immersion is us trying to create an experience for the audience that's different from anything they've experienced before. I feel like with this record, it was more about just like creating the perfect atmosphere where people can just be with our record and experience it in their own way.
You can go to a concert and have a very similar experience that you might have had the week before. So I think our goal is to challenge that and try something new.
It's been like a year and a half of just literally every day we talk about this tour and this show and like how we're gonna make it work, and everything from getting the headphones to the audience to like planning out the 3D mapping to sending Kellen, our sound tech, to Montreal to learn the 3D audio. There was such an amplified stress to every aspect of this project.
You got your guitar on right now, so let's do your guitar, Will.
Chris's snare up.
We've never played these songs before. I feel like we've hyped up this show a lot in our own heads, which I think is fair. Like, it's gonna be sweet, but it's just, there's a bajillion things that are making it sweet, and all those bajillion things need to line up just flawlessly. So, you know, it'll be.
What could go wrong? You know?
This is 100,000.
The hour before, it was kind of just like an anxious feeling of like, okay, this is happening. Okay, what's gonna happen? Is it something gonna go wrong? Is it gonna go right? Are we gonna play good? Are we gonna screw up the songs? Just all of these questions that we've been thinking about are just flying through my head. I don't think I've felt that nervous in a show ever.
We got up there, and as soon as I started playing, I was just shaking.
This was easily the most nervous I've ever been for a show. And like even menial things I've done 10,000 times were infinitely harder. Like when I first got up and I was like putting on my guitar and like doing the cool rock thing where you go through your strap and then in, so you don't, if you step on it, your cable doesn't go out. Even that felt like a mountain I couldn't climb. Like I was so scared and like not in a healthy headspace to start playing vulnerable music that's near and dear to my heart.
Love you, boys. Love you, boys. Let's try it. Let's have fun. Yeah, it doesn't come this far. It's just like the sun. Let's roll some lines.
I looked out and I could feel a lot of affirmation that like, oh my goodness, the thing we've been working on for 18 months is working. So it was like half excitement, half relief, to be quite honest.
I think it was when I saw people closing their eyes, because you see that sometimes in a bar show, but when like half the people in the audience just like have their eyes closed and are kind of just getting lost in the music, and it's like, okay, this is connecting with people, you know?
To be honest, going in, I was thinking things like small things when you're kind of like, oh, I wonder if the lights outside will be distracting because the lights are still on, or I wonder if like the headphones will become annoying after a while. But honestly, as soon as they started playing, it just kind of like all faded away, and they just transport you to a whole other place.
Oh, it was crazy. It was an awesome way to watch a show.
For me, it was like the most realistic to playing in a band, like being on stage. It kind of felt like that.
Or listening at home, like listening to the album, but it being played live right to you. So
they talked about wanting to like give people the experience of music, and when music moves you, you kind of like get shivers, or you like share that moment. And I felt like that happened tonight.
Those last two songs, I honestly had tears in my eyes. I didn't want it to end. It was so good.
This was a project that we put a lot of time and a lot of heart into to create something special. So the fact that it worked out the way we were hoping it would, that makes all of the hours that went into creating this so much more worthwhile. I don't think that's an opportunity people can get all the time, to be able to chase something like this.
It's been amazing to experience us following through with this. Somebody could have been like, you know what, I don't know if it's worth the hassle. Nobody ever said that. Everybody has always been very excited and like willing to push the boundaries and work together to try and make this thing happen.
It would have been easier to have just left an idea that we dreamt up in the van, or the thought that like, man, some band should do this someday. And it's pretty cool to reflect and look back and be like, whoa, like we're that band.
Thank you.
Aha, I think we should be live now. Are we live, actually? Our friend Guy here in Montreal with me. Welcome, everyone, to the Flux Immersive channel for our live of Spat Revolution training. Introduction to Spat Revolution today. Great to be here. Sorry for the little mismatch here at the entrance. But great to be here today with you. My friend Guy is joining me here live in the studio in Montreal, where we actually are broadcasting one of our first, Spat Revolution training. So let's see if we can get my face up online. Yeah, actually, let's go full face online. All right, let's go full. Yeah, indeed. So here I am in Montreal, as I was saying. Joining me on this live is actually our friends in France. Many of the colleagues in France are actually on the chat right now in YouTube, where actually we're going to be answering your questions as they pop up. If you've got any questions, our friend Nicolas is online, our friend Jean-Louis is online. We've got Francis, Felix, Ludo, probably Vincent from support as well, and maybe other colleagues as well, which will be answering questions as they pop up. As I was saying, very excited to be here today. Very excited to be here today to deliver this training. Bear with us. It's the first time we do this, actually, and we are all, somewhere in the world confined. We are here confined in the studio with the help of our neighbors from Expat Studio, helping us with some of the logistics. But we are, everyone confined in a room somewhere, most probably with the situation. So it's kind of weird right now, not to be able to feel, the community, being immersed, I should say, in a group with the dynamic of a group. But we'll be doing this in a different way today, broadcasting you. So, in theory, you guys should be hearing me. I'm actually probably going to check a few of the questions to see, is audio any good? Maybe we can answer on that. Jean-Louis, Nicolas, maybe you want to answer if the audio is going well. Actually, we could probably even push this a bit further, for that matter of fact. Let's see what my friends are telling me on the audio feed here, making sure we're all good before we start. Actually, you know what? And let's even do something. It's okay. Well, actually, it's a good start. And let's do better than that. We're actually going to bring you for a second inside Spat. Just let's see if that works. Is that working? You should hear me in the space now. Are you hearing me in the space, guys? Tell me that. Then you should be hearing me some sort in the front. So for people who don't have headphones at home, we welcome you to actually put a pair on. We'll be doing some binaural audio a bit. It's not the end of the world, but you're obviously going to be appreciating some of that. And let's actually do something. Can you hear me on the left side right now? You should be hearing me on the left side. And you should be hearing me on the right side right now. Let's try the back. That's a tough one for binaural audio. We may discuss that a bit later. But that's a tough one. The back is for binaural audio, but let's go back to the front here. Anyway, I'm basically, bringing my live source into the Spat software, playing with that object, that source, which is our subject of the day indeed. But, and you may be hearing some reverb as well, which is coming from the acoustic simulation part of Spat. Now, let's see. I should actually be back now with you in the real world, no longer in an acoustic space. And let's get going with our subject of the day. Let's actually probably bringing the slideshow here so we can, we can be going. to the various aspects of what we're going to be doing today. We have a list of objectives to cover. We've divided this training session in 4 modules. And these 4 modules is a module on the introduction, where we'll talk about, where we're coming from with this and the actual, some of the use case, out there being in music production and live concerts. We'll talk about post-production. We'll talk basically about the different scenarios. Guy, would you like to put on the screen the PowerPoint as we actually go through some of our content here? So we're going to be doing this introduction. We'll be then doing into 3 modules, which have to do with understanding Spat and then deploying it. And we'll finish up with introduction of integration of Spat with third party. It will be a 2-hour session roughly. We've got question periods. We'll try to make it as dynamic as possible. We may not get deep into integration, but we'll see. Let's see how good we do. Okay, good. So the overall objective for today, you see them online right now on the screen. You're basically going to be talking about object-based mixing and what it is in relation to Spat Revolution. We'll be looking at the different use case scenarios, go deeper in the architecture, this actual open design aspect of Spat, where you create your workflow, your space, basically, your working space. We'll talk about spatialization technologies as well. We'll talk about panning methods and why to use them in various scenarios. And then we'll be talking about the actual configuration per se and some third-party integration. Are we still doing good? Let's just see. Let's just do a quick poll to make sure we are doing good. Yeah? Nicolas and Jean-Louis. Nicolas and Jean-Louis will be with us, for the good period of this 2 hours. And those are the guys that you can complain if things aren't going well. Maybe you're going to say, weird French-Canadian accent. Yeah, indeed, you've got some of that going. Maybe, let's see, Nicolas. That's one thing with YouTube, right? And actually broadcasting, there is some sort of a delay. So let's see what the guys are saying. I'll keep going anyway. We'll watch if anything is going wrong, but I think everything should be going fairly fine. Okay, so as I was saying, we've got 4 modules to cover: introduction, exploring what Spat Revolution is all about, the deployment itself, and then we'll talk about third-party integration. Let's go on. So, basically, the introduction will be talking about us moving to object-based mixing, which is exactly what Spat Revolution is all about. What is Spat Revolution? We'll talk about it. We'll talk about its history a bit, and so on and so forth, and then we'll actually deal with use case scenarios. So what does immersive audio do? It's kind of a famous question, and there's so many words to talk about immersive. Some people refer it as spatial audio, 3D audio. Others are even, we've been hearing the word AD, which I'm still trying to figure out what this is all about. We have figured out that it is a mechanism to bring a stereo, recording into a spatial domain. But anyway, basically we're all around the same thing, where we're trying to bring an immersive experience, so an experience to an audience, right? We're trying to transport them into a space. And this is what immersive does. By obviously bringing them into a space, we bring as well the capability of, what you see is what you hear, or actually what you feel. There's something happening, visually. The connection from audio to video. Guys in doing cinema have been, used to this forever. But this is like, taking, a wider space right now. In live concert, it's taking a wider space because, people want to produce immersive content, binaural audio experiences, for example. And we're basically at the base, what we're doing is we're moving from stereo to more channels, to multiple channels. And we'll talk about this today. We'll talk about these objects in the space. And now, we have a spatial audio engine, that has the capability of processing, treating these objects and distribute, diffuse, potentially render, bounce, multi-channel content. Going good? Okay. So object-based mixing, what is it doing really for us? Object-based mixing is basically bringing us to redefine the way we've been mixing. And, my friend Jean-Louis said it fairly well in a tutorial that we did recently, which was basically, even thinking about object-based for stereo. The point is that, we've been using panners, we've been using faders, we've been using, aux ends and buses and, various ways to actually mix audio. But once you actually start to get a grasp of what an object-based approach can do, you're basically redefining the way you're mixing, and that becomes quite interesting. You're moving an object, a track, a bus, something. You're putting it in the space. You want it, further, closer, towards the left, the front. You're building an image, you're building a scene, and that's what it is. We're basically moving, object into the space. Our audio channels, our sources, are actually, being replaced, by, the tracks are being now replaced by, they're becoming objects. That's what they are. And important to say that it can be applied in any mixed format. I mean, object-based is not strictly an Atmos approach. Object-based, it's just basically, it's a canvas, where objects are sitting, and obviously there's then processing to output this. Okay, Spat Revolution, quick history on this. It is an object-based immersive audio software to create content, and it's actually part of a suite. And the suite is the main application, a standalone software, but at the same time are some plugins, 3 plugins for that matter of fact, that brings the integration to digital audio workstation, show control systems with various formats, which we'll talk about in the later section. And there's quite some history with this Spat Revolution. Important to say that this is an affiliation and a relationship between Flux and the IRCAM Research Institute in France. We've been very lucky for the last close to 10 years now. I've developed this software development relationship with the IRCAM, where we've been developing the software, and actually with 2011, so closer to 10 years, I guess, 9 years now, but going close on 10. And the IRCAM has, years of research in acoustic and connective spaces. Some of you may already know the IRCAM, but we have that luxury really to be, closely working with the IRCAM on the development of Spat Revolution. Sorry for that. Nothing new with Spat Revolution. With Spat per se, it actually existed as a plugin. It existed prior to being Spat Revolution. It existed as a plugin, that you could actually run on your DAW, which was doing some limited work, but was actually there for you to do similar things. What we've basically did is we said, let's stop about the limitation of being a plugin strictly and sitting on a digital audio workstation, for example, limited in resources, busing capabilities, and a longer list of things. And we actually moved to, we like to call it a revolutionary audio software, immersive audio software, standalone, that can actually play by itself if we wanted to. And we'll talk about this, the various ways to bring signal into it. And that, that toolbox, that I was talking about is with the integration of the plugin, for example. So that's how we tie into the DAW these days. Various market, the music post-production is definitely one of them, composition, live production, VR, theatrical installs. I mean, really, wherever there's immersive content to be created, Spat can be a tool. And we'll be looking at this actual open design approach that gives us quite a bit of flexibility. So that's it. That's what the Flux IRCAM Spat looked back in 2010. So, some time ago here. Sorry for that. Okay. That open design approach. So let me just take a quick break here, making sure everything is cool, still on our feed. Yeah? All is good. We hear that all is good. So open design approach. What do we mean by open design approach? Well, we literally mean that we're giving you an open canvas, an open setup page. We'll look at that page. You probably have that page already in front of you. If you've opened and downloaded the Spat application, you're all being granted of a 90 days license. If you haven't received that license, feel free to actually ping our team in support or actually on the chat. We could probably won't be able to deliver the licenses now, but we'll make sure to deliver you licenses after the training session. And the idea is to give you the ability to deploy of what we've been talking here today at your own pace, at home, and take a deeper dive in Spat Revolution. So that open design approach is really basically, and actually we could rapidly turn to one of our screen here. Maybe we actually turn to the Spat Revolution here on my right side. right? So what we meant basically by the open design is you've got the capability to designing your flow from in to out, right? The modules, the various modules, which kind of inputs, which kind of binaural stream you're creating, being binaural, ambisonic, channel-based, and this is what the open design is all about. Okay, let's move on. That's going back to this slideshow here. Thank you. Bit of water. Okay, and this open design brings us what? It brings us the capabilities to basically make it whatever we want. We do bring a simple integration to DAW with this famous plugin that we were talking about. Brings you software local in and out, software I/O we call it. We call them the local PAT. And then the ability to adapt as well to actually being able rapidly to actually deliver multiple content, various formats at the same time. This open architecture, open design allows you to put different rooms, we call them, blocks. We'll talk about them today. Now, we do support ambisonic format. We'll talk about offline creation as well, because that's an interesting thing when you're doing live production, for example, the ability, without the loudspeaker system, for example, for a sound designer to start create some of the intentions, some of the, building the scenes, building the space, the future space, building some object movements, doing this as an offline creation. So we'll look at this. So a lot of actual, possibilities, with that open design or, concept. Okay. You've actually, if you're depending on what time you've tuned in on this feed, you've actually, saw some of the story about Close Talker. What Close Talker was all about is one of our case for today. It was an actual immersive tour, they called it, binaural audio tour, the geeky way to say it, but it was presented as a special experience. Immersion, the show was called. And Close Talker used, in their particular scenario, Spat Revolution to actually do exactly this on tour. So dual Spat system. We're actually going to look at the quick diagram to show you what that setup was about. But basically 2 computers doing main and backup processing. Keep in mind, all the audience were on headphones. There was no concept of loudspeaker on the show. The show was presented across Canada as a tour, but it was presented in awkward locations, in a bar, in a museum, places where you typically, on a rooftop was another interesting one. Places where you wouldn't typically present a show. And the fact that, the headphone concept, went pretty well for that. Now, yes, it was only 64 people. It was a VIP audience. But, basically proving the concept of, of binaural audio for a live experience, transporting basically their audience. So we'll be actually taking a quick look at Close Talker right now. I'm actually going to jump in this as our first, maybe because I've already touched the subject. Here is rapidly, what the actual system looked. This was done with an Avid S6L system. As you can see on screen there, a bit of block diagram, but basically, we add, stage inputs that were coming in and feeding, post-fader, channel pickups, basically post-fader feeding in MADI feeds to 2 computers going through some audio interfaces to actually have 2 Spat Revolution computer live. Actually, if we move to the next slide on this one, let's look at this here. Right, so basically you see here on the bottom in the red square, you see, the 2 computers and the computers receiving control data, position, being, the automation, if you want to call it this way, from a live console in this case, with the S6L. The other aspect of this is, as I was saying, pickoff, that were coming either from channels or from actual Mixbox group sends. In this particular show, every single channel had a post-fader direct out send to the MADI outputs, feeding an audio interface, and ultimately the 2 computers. And the last but not least, I guess we can cover this, is on the input side. Live inputs were all live on this show, but they had as well a virtual production aspect, so a Pro Tools, a recording device that was recording, and they were able to, build the show, mix the show offline, with that actual virtual sound check, we could call it. You've got another example here of what's going on. Let me prepare, and as you guys are digesting, Here we're actually seeing, more of the actual specific system from a interconnecting perspective. I'm just gonna go here. I have a quick look and making sure everything is good. Actually, perfect, Guy. We've actually just turned to the Spat Revolution computer. This is the computer it was exactly that computer that was on that tour, I think, was it? Anyway, whatever, a little Mac Mini computer in a rack. You're basically seeing the scene. And what we're gonna be doing, I'm gonna play for you a quick, about a minute and a half. And what we're gonna be playing here is, from the end, I'm gonna be playing it from the end of a solo, towards the end of a song, and then a transition to another song. You'll be able to appreciate some of the movements and what's going on. So let me actually put some headphones to make sure that we're all good. Just making sure I can listen. I can hear myself, maybe not. Okay. I'm still with you. Okay. Yeah. I'm going to mute myself for a second. And let's go listen to this.
Are carefully in the dark. Yeah, you are carefully in the dark.
Aha. I'm back with you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, that was a bit of our assess system for Close Talker. Just basically give you an idea. I think we had a little audio click on this, but overall, you should have actually felt what was going on, and you saw those little bubbles, these little object moves, and this was basically, recalling some live snapshots. The mixing engineers was live recalling those. This was not fully built in a sense that, there was some live interaction from the mixing engineer perspective as far as, firing a movement in a bridge somewhere. 3-4 movements per song most of the time. The rest of the time was building a static scene, being able to play with the reverb engine, which we'll talk about a bit. But I hope you appreciate this, to give you kind of an idea of what went on there. We had the playback video as well on this, so we have the luxury to have the multi-track on this one. Let's just briefly look on the system here to actually talk about the setup. You actually can see it on screen right now. And you'll see, we're basically presenting you this basic concept of live inputs. So we add on this, 32, 96K input, from live coming in from live sources, from the SXL console I was explaining. But these sources were hitting two rooms. You see these virtual spaces. You see the first one on the left side here, our actual binaural room. And then you'll start to wonder, Hugo, why is there an actual second room? Well, we actually played a little trick on this one. We've basically added some sources going into a stereo room. Why did we do this? Stereo headphones, intracranial, right? Between the ears, the kick, the bass. There are some things that we didn't necessarily want to synthesize. With the binaural, sometimes, it could affect timbre. It was really to give that punchiness, if you want. But all the other elements, so except three sources, which was the kick, the bass, all the other sources were living in that binaural space. So we were outputting, a binaural, a stereo, a two-channel binaural, and then a stereo, which were getting summed. Where? Well, back at the console. The console was getting back those feed, main and backup computers. For that matter of fact, our show was more complex than that. We actually were delivering two type of binaural, rooms. So we had double the rooms there. Why did we do this? That was to give the ability to use various HRTF filters. We'll talk about this as we go into panning and spatialization techniques a bit later. Good stuff. Let's go back to, we'll keep the questions for the end anyway. I did not explain it too well at the beginning, but we will be having those question periods. So 4 modules, as I said, each of the modules will actually take some questions. Some questions may be answered live. If you have questions right now about things, what's going on, feel free. You can actually ask on the chat. Our friends Jean-Loup and Nicolas and the rest of the team, Vincent may be online as well, will be actually very happy to dive in and respond to those questions. And we will actually going to be keeping some, to answer them live with you at the end of the session. Hope that makes sense for you guys. So feel free to ask any question. You can keep them for later as well. Okay, well, we're going to jump into another actual use case scenario here with Cirque du Soleil. We see some picture of the Bazaar show, but we actually have a typical approach that we've done with 2-3 shows right now with Cirque. Actually, I wanted to share with you, and we talk about Cirque. I mean, basically, we're talking about, a big top. We're talking about 4 masks. We're talking about audience, not fully all around, but 3 faces of that circular stage, and that's what we're going to be talking about. Let me dive in actually here and go sit down. I'm going to go sit down on the chair and take another sip of water. Yeah, let's leave it on the PowerPoint, on the presentation for a second as I get ready here. Okay. We'll unmute some audio. We may need some audio. Here I am. Aha. Hello. That will be my actual position for quite a bit of this training, where I'm going to be sitting in front of my computer here, being able to show you and share with you. We'll be diving into Spat. We'll look at these, use case scenarios a bit deeper. Okay. Guy, my friend Guy, let's actually switch to that live computer here to see. Aha. Yeah. Okay, so what we have in front of you guys, that's perfect, Guy, good job. What you have in front of you guys is Spat Revolution software again, and we'll be seeing that baby quite often today. And what you have as well on the left, quick piano test, is actually a QLab file that I've been using to be able to play some sound, obviously, to this, and actually do some movements and stuff. So the Cirque du Soleil scenario is interesting. Let's actually look at this particular one here. You are basically looking at the top view, and I hope you can appreciate the overlay aspect of Spat. which I'm going to show you later how to do. But this little concept of overlay allows us to actually see, a bit what's going on from a speaker arrangement perspective and where our source are living into this. Becomes very practical for offline creation, for example. Let's just look at that particular setup now. I've got nothing on the input side. I'm just strictly using a single input, which is coming from my QLab, but I've got these rooms. I actually added an extra stereo for the matter of fact, but I've got these rooms. That's exactly what we did. And so what we've got for rooms here is basically various rooms doing different things. We've got this VBAP circle thing, which is basically only the outside speakers. Sorry, I was not looking at the camera. Oh, there we are. Well, actually, we've got this VBAP room, what we call it, but it's a circle room, which is basically dealing only with the outside speakers. So it's a partial arrangement that we're taking. Why are we doing this? Well, we may be bringing sources in that room for an actual circular effect around the tent. That would be one, let's say, intent. The other intent, you see the KNN here, and we'll talk about KNN as a panning method, which is actually not a true panning method, but it is a panning tool in some ways. It does some panning if you want. There's some amplitude anyway, distribution. And KNN, what allows us to do, it's actually to localize. We're using this room to localize. So anything we want to localize, the clown effect right next to the mass, somewhere in the venue. We can use this particular room for that. And then we have the other one here, which is the 5.1. And now people are like, oh, Hugo, why are you confusing me with the 5.1? Well, let's dive into it right now, actually. What's interesting with this 5.1, is the fact that we basically are creating a 5.1 stream that will get distributed at our 3 audience faces. So what we've basically got, this is an audience zone. You can probably see it from the KNN, better. You see LCR rear, LCR rear, and LCR rear. So basically we had one room delivering, the bed, what we like to call them the bubble, the surround bubble, whatever, a bubble for that audience zone, and the same thing going on. So that basically 5.1 was distributed in the various feeds. It was the same feed. And the idea there was not to create localization, it was to create, let's call it the bubble, an immersive bubble, basically a good solid music bed, not based as much on localization. So this is what we were basically doing. So this is the concept of multi-room, which we'll be talking about today. And then, these variant spaces, here, let's go back to the KNN one. This was the one used for localization. Actually probably give you that better of a feed here. Here you basically see all loudspeakers. Well, it's not right, not all loudspeakers. It's all basically virtual nodes or virtual locations that we've decided to have. Now, that particular speaker here, which is one of the mass. It's actually not one speaker, as you can imagine. There's probably 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 speakers. That are dealing with representing that virtual source, that source in the space, that speaker source. But, and it's the same thing pretty much everywhere, I guess, except the centers. Oh, no, for that matter of fact, for centers as well. But basically, you have here the map of all the possible, speakers. And, talking about a source, well, this is our source moving into the actual space. Now, for this particular setup today, my source is actually feeding the 3 actual room. So it means that if I actually move the source in one room, it's actually moved in all the rooms. Let's try some audio with this, see if I can actually do that. Should be able to. Okay. I'm going to grab the headphones. Always want to make sure that your audio feed is actually acceptable and not too loud. Oh, that was a nice little feedback from headphones to a microphone. You see? Okay. Let's try that. Aha. I think we've got that. Okay, do we hear the audio? Let's just ask this as we just switch system. I think we should be doing good. The level should be okay. No complaints. Yeah, I see Jean-Louis Nicolas. Yeah, it's okay. It's not great. It's okay. Okay, let me remove the headphones then. Well, actually, I'm going to leave the headphones on. Okay, so I just played the actual piano track that I have living in QLab right now. Well, we actually can start to talk about automation. And what I want you actually to appreciate and to find weirder is the jumps that actually are going on from one source, from as the source is moving around. And there's a specific reason for this. And this is called KNN, and KNN in this particular setup here is locking to the closest loudspeaker. And we're doing this on intentionally here. Let me just mute this feed here. And actually, we're going to move to binaural audio here instead of being in the KNN. But what I want you to understand on what we're doing, and we'll look at this later in the actual presentation, is how I was actually previewing in binaural audio. I was previewing that speaker arrangement, that KNN arrangement. I could have done the same thing for the circle here. Okay. So basically right now I'm listening to that source in the circle space. And we're calling this binaural preview, which we'll cover later. Let's just go back, strictly to, but no, I think we've actually covered, some of the points here. We'll come back to some of this. What I want you to appreciate here is, a source, and in this particular case, in these type of shows, sources will hit different rooms, and it's not necessarily a source that will hit all these rooms, these spaces. Some of the music instruments will live in the 5.1 bed, that will get distributed into the audience faces. And then we've got some of the source will be used for localization only. The objects, will be for localization is this KNN space. And last but not least, we'll have some spin around sources, sources that we can just throw in this circle room that will basically be only the outside speakers. If we actually look at this, this is only the outside loudspeakers of the system. Okay, of the tent. So this is what we're doing, and the binaural audio was interesting there because you could actually connect all the audio sources as well to binaural audio, which could be very practical for video captures, for example. Right, you want to deliver the show, well, instead of delivering the show on a just a left-right, a stereo headphone output, being able to deliver it in binaural is kind of interesting. You're delivering a video content with some spatial at the same time. It can all be done at the same time from the save file if you wanted to. Let's just move quickly to the, how are we doing on time? We're doing okay. Time is flying. We knew this would to come. And for the people that know me out there, and there's quite a bit of a great population on this feed, actually. I don't know, we've hit actually, hundreds of people that registered to this. So felt like, there was quite an excitement about this. We are talking about live right now. We'll jump into music production. We want you guys to obviously, appreciate the fact that we're not strictly living into live. And we have people here on the live feed from the music production world, artists, composers, sound designers. We've got people in true post-production, delivering multiple type of, doing multiple deliverables on various projects. We've got people from the live world, obviously, that join us. Quite a bit of people from live system installations as well. I think close to 50% of the registration. So interesting mix anyway. So we're trying to stay as generic as possible. But, so this typical approach of Cirque is basically, us doing, multi-room, for multiple creative effects. And, the ability to choose the panning method, the panning time, the spatialization technology to actually create that effect. And then obviously, the parameters of these objects are speaker agnostic, your configuration agnostic. And what we mean by this is basically, the object properties live in the object. And the object then gets connected, the source gets connected to various rooms. And these parameters stay there. You can change the output format very rapidly. We're doing binaural recording. Yes? Oh, you want me to look at the camera? Sorry, I'm looking at that screen now. Yeah. You see, Guy is bringing me back here. He's like, Hugo, stay on track, stay on the camera. Your live audience is there. I mean, I'm just used, to watch, a lot of people in the venue. And here you can probably just hear, I'm in an empty, yeah? Can you feel the room? It's fairly empty, and that's not going through Spat. That's the the real acoustic space here. Okay. Anyway, I feel a bit better now. Training has started. We've got about 30 minutes. We're getting close to the end on this one anyway. A little water. Always good. Okay, moving on. And just basically, do a quick parenthesis as we were showing Anna the QLab thing, going on there. You can imagine that, the ability, I don't need to deal with audio, but the ability to actually program a movement, and look at that movement of what's going on, and being able to build libraries of movements and cue lists. Like that's the sound designer kind of, part here. Being able to create this offline without the loudspeaker system and being able to preview, which we'll look later. And then obviously push that session online, on site when you get access to the loudspeaker system. And practical, the offline creation is not strictly a theatrical or live show scenario. That actual scenario is valid for anyone. A sound designer, someone wanting to create something offline. And offline, what? Well, on a plane. Okay, moving on, basically, we've covered the live, the live aspect, the live integration, basically with that theatrical show. Let's just briefly talk about some of the functionalities that we bring into live before we jump into music production, and then we'll close on some questionings. So yeah, local I/O or network connectivity, what do we mean by this? Well, basically, Spat in the live scenario gets his audio feed from an audio interface, being a MADI interface, being whatever, Thunderbolt, whatever, USB audio interface, or from some network audio. We'll talk about core audio and ASIO later. Well, yeah, so anything AES-67, Ravenna, AVB, Dante, network audio mechanism is a valid way to get in and out of Spat. And basically, the show controllers, Spat is not designed to be a show controller per se. It's a live engine, that processes sources. So someone needs to tell, basically, what Spat needs to, what Spat's job, basically. And show controllers and playbacks, are, working for us there. I'm, mentioning QLab and Ovation. We've got a great relationship going on with Ovation for Merging Technology, PC-based show controller, where we're building OSC Record right now. So stay tuned for this coming out shortly. And then the QLab is obviously the famous one, as many people, have seen it, played with it, probably, the Mac base only, but working definitely very good, for building automation. We haven't talked, yet about tracking, but that's another aspect of what we do. Blacktrack's real-time tracking or any OSC tracking system can easily be integrated. And this is done thanks to OSC. And OSC means obviously any generic remote controllers. We have Lemur, templates as well available for that. And well, even a plugin. Our plugin actually runs on some live consoles. So, the live console integration becomes either a matter of the plugin when it can live, including in the Avid SXL. If not, we're using generic OSC. We'll talk about this later anyway. Okay. Things are coming actually for the live production folks out there. Snapshot automation, which is not live production specific. That's coming for all users shortly. But we've got other live production things, features coming shortly. Server and render, not render, but yeah, server render mode and remote. What do we mean by this? Basically, it's the server-client concept. And that's not just from a live show perspective. It's a live broadcast. It could be a studio, a larger studio that wants to have these processing computers, these renderers, sitting in a room in the back somewhere. So these functionalities for, we call them live production, are coming down the line, this, client mode. Wavefill synthesis. Wavefill synthesis is another very interesting one, which we won't talk about today too much, but it's coming as well for frontal system for the live shows. And we'll be updating some of our speaker configuration management tool. Okay, let's move now to studio production, a subject that people love to talk about. We all love to talk about studio production workflows. We're going to be looking at one workflow today. You see again, we'll be dealing with the same thing. We'll be dealing with some sources that are hitting some rooms. And then we'll be delivering, doing multiple deliverables. And that's our whole concept. What we're going to be doing today is we're going to be delivering and monitoring various formats, Atmos 22.2 and multiple binaural streams. And we're going to be looking at how we actually can write automation rapidly. So let's actually do this. We've got some questions going here already, which I can't answer, but I will do them later. Sorry, I'm watching on the other screen here. Okay, let's see. Is Pro Tools appy? It was not appy earlier. Let's just see. Okay, I'm gonna close that session. Wow, it doesn't have an eye lock. Ah, don't we like eye locks? We love them. It's gonna work. You see, plug and plug. You see, USB-C, fun. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 adapters, 3 adapters on my computer. You can't see them, but there's a shitload of adapters hanging, and one of them is, dealing with eye locks. Okay, let's open this session here. Let's hope that everything goes well. Huh? And you were able to appreciate what's going on here. These sources appear automatically. My spat sources, my spat departures. I've already that session created for you guys. Well, let's look at what we've got on the Pro Tools session rapidly before we talk about the spat. We're using Pro Tools today. Reaper, you guys can use pretty much any DAW. We like to support as many as possible with this beautiful software integration. There's challenges coming with that. But anyway, we're showing it with Pro Tools today. We actually have a tutorial online for how to do the Pro Tools, and we'll be sharing templates with you guys later on. But what we've got actually going here is, the concept of software inputs, between Spat between Spat and the DAW in question. Reaper as well, by the way. We've just released some Reaper DAW that our friend Jean-Loup did not long ago. What we've got here, we've got that source, again, that piano source. I hope you guys love it because we'll be playing it again. We've got that piano source, and just to actually keep us, for various reasons, first of all, not to be able to be limited to pre-fader inserts, because we're inserting actually on the track these spat sends, the departure to spat, to actually be able to get post, fader send, and as there's no post support in Pro Tools and many DAWs. Actually, I think Nundo, our friends at Nundo do that anyway, maybe others. So basically, we're actually going to be using the concept of having some, some auxes, and basically, some send, some mono send, some stereo sends, maybe a 5-1 send and a 7-1 send. Basically, we'll be sending, to spat. So that's what you've got in blue. In yellow is a track, it could be multiple tracks. And the advantage of doing this is you can actually think about any typical bus, parallel bus processing that you would be doing at home, in your studio that you're used to. You're kind of not breaking some of your habits there. It's just basically bringing in a bunch of aux sends that will be sending post fader to spat. And on the return side, we've created these buses that are actually there for return. One is an Atmos bus. So one is an Atmos bus. We can basically return Atmos and build an Atmos bed. So you're going to be seeing today is the ability for Spat to replace the panner. Well, we're not going to be using any of the panner here. Don't bother about this. There's no longer a panner. We're going to be an object base. These are all objects in the space, and that means that we're going to be able to build an Atmos bed. And you know what? Let's just push it further. I'm actually showing you how to do an NHK 22.2. Now, Hugo, you may be asking, why is there 3 NHK.2? Well, that comes with the limitation of the DAW. The DAW, in this particular case, Pro Tools, does not support more than 16 channel. So we're doing 3 8-channel returns for a 22.2, 22 plus 2, 24, 3 times 8 channel. If we're all following here, that's how I'm returning this. But it's fine. We don't really care. I mean, it's just, extra work on the routing, but once the template is built, the template is built. And what you're seeing as well, I've got 4 binaural feeds coming back. 3 are for monitoring with different HRTF, which we'll talk later. And the other one is actually my main binaural feed. Okay, let's look at that. Let's look at what it looks from an actual perspective of. We have some audio, maybe. Let's see. Et voilà. And we have some audio. I like it when it works the first time. So what you see here is basically all our sends are actually hitting all the rooms in this particular case. Different than the Cirque du Soleil or the theatrical scenario. We have all the sources sharing their source properties in all the rooms. The rooms, you could look at them as the deliverables. I've got an NHK here, I've got a binaural, and for the sake of today, I've added an Atmos as well. So if we actually go look in these various rooms, it's all the same thing. Well, the scaling was different, but it's all the same thing. It's basically, a speaker arrangement of 22.2, right? an actual binaural. There's no speaker. There's only a listening head in the case of binaural. And then we've got an Atmos. You know, some of you may be familiar with this little baby. You know, top and front view and a little Atmos. Okay, so what are we able to do here? Well, we'll be able to actually create this content, and what we're actually doing, and we'll deep in this later, go deeper in this. We can bring back this session. The idea is that NHK, you know, feed actually, we're doing some little extra routing here, but what we're actually doing is that NHK feed is actually feeding some binaural monitoring. So that's the binaural preview concept, which we'll talk about. Basically, we're tapping, we're synthesizing the output of all the loudspeakers, okay? And we can do the same thing in Atmos. So the ability to binauralize, or, you know, get a binaural synthesis of the stream, the Atmos stream. So yeah, you know, let's put some music. Can you hear me? Yeah. We can bring this down a bit. I think it works. Okay, anyway, right, here we are. We've got a source. This is our stereo source. Is that it? No, that's not it. That's the one. Yep. So that's what we're actually doing here. Sorry for the clips. I'm actually doing another thing at the same time. But basically, you know, what you've got going is the same concept as earlier. I'm moving the sources. You were listening to the binaural preview of that actual NHK 22.2 speaker arrangement. You know, if you actually were to, you know, do some elevation on that source, you can actually see it on the right side, right? You'll see the elevation of that particular. We'll get into source properties anyway. Yeah. Good. Giving you a little example there, and we'll take some questions anyway shortly. Actually, pretty much right now. To get done with that section, we've got about, you know, something was supposed to go 30 minutes, is about 45 right now, so it's okay, you know. Typical Hugo, for the one that know me, I can talk for hours. Hopefully, I'm not boring you too much. But there's quite a bit of interesting things, you know, that I wanted to kind of talk about. This is our, you know, production really scenario here. I did not talk too much about the automation, but you know, the actual aspect of, you know, taking that actual, you know, that source here, putting it, you know, in right, and then being able to write, you know, some automation. That should work. Yeah, it did work for us. Okay, so you saw, you know, rapidly how we were writing automation. This is the fact that the Spat plugin, all parameters of a source, the Spats, and we'll look at this in integration later, are all available to your automation. So rapidly, you can do the movements in Spat, or just write them on the timeline for that matter of fact, and quickly build automation. Okay, let's go back to the slideshow to take some questions. Okay, the last one as a transition maybe. Okay, question time. Okay, what do we've got? Question for you, Hugo. Not the recommended. Note the recommendation of using DBAT for live console, sweet spot centric. Okay, well, we're going to keep this one for later. This had to do with panning type. Any panning type that utilize as, effect, delay. Delay, no, we don't have any delay panning, you know, if that's the question that we currently offer. I did cover about wave fill synthesis, you know, which is that spatialization technique to actually, you know, recreate the wavefront, using all the loudspeakers to recreate the wavefront of a source in the space. And obviously here are, you know, delay and more filterings and processing to do it. But currently, no, we do not have any delay processing. We're going to talk about DBAP as an alternate method. Some people may say, well, Hugo, your VBAP thing is a, you know, sweet spot. Yeah, sweet spot centric. A very interesting subject, which we'll cover in the next section for that matter of fact. Okay. Response, you see, I didn't even look at the response. My team is great. They're actually giving me the response. I don't need to say anything. I just need to read. I don't need even to think. I love that. Okay, OSC is only one direction and shaking. Slow? No. I'm not too sure what the question is. Okay, I'm gonna skip that one. Okay, can you show us how to select the room that a source is using? I'm not sure I'm understanding this one. Maybe just some clarification on this question. Which ArchRTF are you using for this demo? Good questions. And my Pro Tools telling me that I love you, Pro Tools. Bye-bye. Maybe I'm moving my computer too much, and the iLock with all the adapters is not happy. So you were asking me about the actual HRTF. Good question. So what I was sending you from the last session, when we were in the music production session, what I was sending you is here the KMAR. We'll talk about HRTF later. We're sending the KMAR. You know, the idea of having multiple binaural, preview here was actually to offer various HRTF filters. You know, you've got a little list there. We can import more. But what you were listening is a KMAR, which we consider to be the dummy ed generic, HRTF. On this one here, good question as well. You were probably on a KMAR as well. Yeah, we were doing a KMAR as well when we were doing the closed talker session. Okay. Is there any output limitation? Are there any output limitation for Navid SXL? What do you mean by this? From an integration perspective, there's no limitation as far as the instances. We typically have been testing 64, Spat, Sen, plugin, insert on mono, a channel or stereo for that matter of fact, to be able to control them. From a control perspective, there's not. Then, if you're talking about actual SXL and its integration, I think I have a slide later at the integration part, so we're going to keep that one for integration later. Depending what you're using, to route. Currently, MADI is the main, probably one of the easiest and the best way to do it. So if you've got the proper computers behind it, the proper audio MADI interfaces, depending on the latency expectation, you can go quite high. I would say that, 64 at 96K is already, from important session. Could go, to 128 potentially. Again, computer. For these scenarios, we are looking at, specific hardware recommendation, specification. That's how we work the live industry, by the way. We've got this consulting group called Flux Immersive that we've created where, we're deploying support for live, for actual live shows. Yes, thank you. You're bringing me to the correct camera. Yeah, exactly. So we basically, are doing these, this hardware recommendation, for actual live shows, because it really depends on what you're trying to achieve, interface and all. There's quite a bit of flexibility in the software package, but there's a need to do a proper integration validation of the hardware. Okay. How did you have a room with a speaker arrangement that is focused on the audience zone for the Cirque? How did you have a room with a speaker arrangement? Well, the trick on the Cirque arrangement is that, you've got all these outputs, right? These rooms. But you need ultimately to do a matrixing of that. And we typically leave this to loudspeaker management. So these discrete channel LCR, and the rears are basically, getting distributed, with a matrix. In this case, whatever they're using being whatever DSP box that's being used by the touring show. So basically that portion gets done outside of Spat. Currently, there's no, to answer the question, we do have a matrix at the output, but there's no gain, the gain, and it's not an actual matrix mixer at the output. And that's what you want to be doing, basically deciding what goes where from this 5.0 bed. Here you're looking at really just creating the stream. Some of them, and it's the same thing for, the KNN. The KNN, I said, we had like 1, 2, 3, like 14, 15, 18, whatever, virtual speakers, but each of those were representing multiple more speakers. Back to the matrix. Okay, I think we should be done. I don't know if I'm answering all the question. I hope so. Explain the radius already. You guys are already in the radius. That's the thing. Guys are at home with their computers playing with some source parameters, and we'll get into this right now. I'm sure we're going to be covering the proper things. So this was just a little introduction, guys, right? Keep in mind that I was not even trying to show you how to do things. I was really there to introduce you some of the concepts. The concept of, production scenario, the concept of actual of actual theatrical show. So basically looking at different ways the software can integrate and why we have all these blocks. So let's actually dig in right now into our next section where we're going to be exploring Spat Revolution software. So here we are. Here we are. I'm actually going to be closing this session. Let's go back live on this, please. Okay. And we'll be bringing Spat at some point anyway. So what we're going to be doing is basically we're going to be looking at, the environment, this open design. We're going to start to talk about the sources, the objects in the space, and the parameters from them. And then the virtual sources, the actual sources, or it's actually the virtual sources, the virtual rooms. These space with acoustic simulation. Yeah, you may actually have picked up a reverb at one point. Yeah, there is an actual reverb engine. It's called the acoustic simulation of the room, which is quite important in the old Spat concept. We'll talk about spatialization technology and panning techniques, and then go on is the speaker arrangement. We could overlays and how we actually construct this to go back in the modules. Okay, so let's go in the actual Spat environment itself. Let's just switch to our main Pro Tools computer here. Not Pro Tools, but main Spat computer. Not that one, sorry. Wrong call for me. That one, yeah. We've got computers everywhere, as you can see from the camera shots. Maybe too many, but whatever. That's another debate for another day. So yeah, basically you've got, when you're opening, you're probably home sitting with this, this open. You probably already started design, probably already listening to some stuff. Some of you are actually fast on the mouse, and that's all good. That means that you're already feeling comfortable about deploying a workflow. So we've got this page here. It's basically the only page when we, start, where we've got a setup environment. Basically we're going to be designing our, our workflow. I'm going to be opening a session for this particular one. We're actually going to get back to creating it, to completely creating, because I'm going to dig right away on. Well, we can actually take this one. I think that's fine. We're actually going to be digging back in this session from the production scenario, and to actually explore more about the rooms and what they are and the modules and so on and so forth. Okay, so what you see here is the same thing, the setup, and this is the setup that was created, the template. We can call it a template. For that matter of fact, once this is configured, there's no real reasons to be there. We could almost remove it, being when you're in show mode. This is something that's actually coming down the line. We've got these sources up there, right? So we see this architecture, the environment, where, we've got our sources coming. So we're flowing top to bottom. You guys probably realized that already. And as soon as you add an actual room, one thing happens is that you actually see an extra room recreated on the top. So these are your environments. This is how you actually navigate into these various environments. So when you look at it from the architecture and the environment perspective, the setup page, all the rooms you have created, and when you name them, there's obviously the name. And then on the top right is the preferences, which is part of the next module, looking at actually configuring to get where we got. So flowing down to actually from inputs, and we'll be looking at all these modules later on as well. I'm going to be bringing you through all these modules. But right now, let's just focus on these sources that are hitting the rooms and that are appearing here on top. And we'll talk about the rest after. And now, let's actually open a room. So if we open a room, we can do it simply by double-clicking on it or accessing it. You see the little mute button. This is the mute for the actual, mute, the room itself. And you can see the speaker overlay. Let's talk about this rapidly as well from a room view perspective. We've got the speaker alpha. And the speaker alpha is basically, you see the speakers or not in the arrangement. Scaling allows you to scale, depending what you're doing, the actual scale of these objects being speaker objects, source objects, little lightness control. You may have more or less controls here, depending how, big your screen is. I'm actually missing one, I think, here. And so on and so forth. You can work in white mode if you would actually prefer to work in white mode as well. We've got the black mode, the dark mode, and I'm a dark mode kind of guy. And then the views here, are top and front views, okay? So, if you actually choose top and front, well, you got a top and a front. You can actually zoom in this, scroll in, scroll out, easily of this. And if I'm holding the control key, I'm actually can, manipulate this. This is very important to understand. We're giving you a 3D, environment here. It's a 3D graphic engine style. So it does take quite a bit of graphic resource. We'll talk about resources later. But this is it, this is us spinning that room in various ways and zooming in and out. And so I'm zoomed in. You see? Okay, if we go to binaural one, you see that there's actually no speakers. Why? Well, there's no concept of speakers in binaural. It's a head. Now on top view, this is our head, this is our sources all around us. Okay, making sense? And then we're in the Atmos arrangement here. Okay, you can see it. By the way, if you hit Option click, you're going to be resetting it. So if you've moved it with the control and then, Option click, boom, here you are. Okay, so, okay, I think we've done that little portion here. I'm probably going to be, let me just do something here. I'm actually going to go to, yes, let me go back to that theatrical one, just because it was, I had my automation going. Okay, let's do that. Okay, now we have audio if we need it, as we're going to be talking about the next aspect of this, which will be sources. So those sources, that source in this particular case, connected to all the rooms. And when you go into the rooms, you can see that source. I'm going to take something without the overlay for now, so it makes more sense. So what we have here, default position of a source. And basically what we're going to be going through here is the various source parameters. There's a long list. We're not going to be able to appreciate all of them right now. Impossible, unless you want to stick with me for 2 days, which, unless you've got something better to do. A lot of us would say, you know what, Hugo, no problem, we've got all the times in the world, but we wanted to keep this short at a 2-hour session. There'll be some more advanced, sessions coming down the line. We're, very excited to deliver you this for the first time. Okay, so we'll be going about, basically looking at, the source parameters. Some of them. We'll talk about these perceptual factors. And why are they important? It's back to this acoustic simulation. We have an acoustic simulation, important aspect of Spat, and that means that you're bringing the objects in the space, and there's a reverb engine that handles of creating a space. Now, you're not obliged to activate this reverb engine, but it would be, there's great reasons to do so, and we'll talk about them. And we'll look at the basic positioning or the radiation of a source and the concept of radius. We've got the question. We'll talk about the radius. Okay. Maybe you're going to go on the slideshow quick, just so we can go over the things quick. So the source have a radiation, AED, azimuth, elevation, distance, polar style, and a position XYZ Cartesian, parameter to place these sources in the space. So you can work in polar or in Cartesian. You've got 2 options to begin with. And it's always from the listening or the center point of reference, right? That's your reference to, towards distance, towards pretty much anything, the angle if you're in AED. And then this famous distance is actually the sense of proximity, right? The distance, you move a source further away, it drops in level, and that's, we'll talk about this. And the radius is the important aspect of this when we're using VBAPs, for example, or amplitude, panning or angular type panning style, for example. We'll look at other parameters such as the yaw. Oh yeah, the yaw is the orientation. Source have an orientation, and why do they have an orientation? Well, because they excite the room. So if the source is not looking at you, you can we'll go back into Spat in 2 seconds anyway. The room acoustic simulation, the radius, we'll talk about this radius. That's important because it's the threshold of where the amplitude variation starts, okay? VBAP, for example, does not work on distance. So the distance and where the signal starts to drop is defined by a parameter that's called radius. It's set by default to 2 meters, and if you're dealing with a standard speaker arrangement, you're at the 2 meter. Speaker line is at 2 meter. So you basically, as soon as you're leaving, actually, do we have a, this is right? So you see it's at the speaker line right now. It's at the speaker line. So as soon as you basically, if you have a parameters, the radius of 2 meters, which we're actually going to go here, by having a radius of 2 meter, which we have, let's just see. Yeah, that we have. Basically, the signal start to drop when we move. And that's the important aspect of radius. We'll get back into it. Let's just go back to the slideshow. Well, you don't need to. Yeah, well, I'm fine. Thank you. Okay, so let's dive into this. We'll talk about spreading as well, So the spreading, ultimately, the width of a source. So that will basically, force, the panning method to go beyond what it's doing at the base and starting to spread the signal over multiple speakers. When we're in KNN, there's actually another spreading parameter that's called the neighborhood, the percentage. We'll get into this. And last but not least, the send. Yes, someone didn't talk about or didn't ask the question, well, Hugo, how do we send signal to low frequency? There's a departure. Every single source have a send departure to manage your low frequency content. So any speaker arrangement with a .1, so N+1 or N1 system will actually have automatically single departure currently, working potentially on adding more if we see the need. Okay. Let's look at these source parameters. Let me play some audio. It's never bad to play some audio. Level is good to talk on top of this, I guess. Let me just put the binaural room. So binaural room right now, we'll look at the binaural room even better. I'm gonna drop that signal a bit. Okay, these perceptual factors are right there. Let's begin with those ones. They are basically, let me drop this a bit, not to be too aggressive too much with this. So basically, you've got, the presence, which is an interesting one. That's basically your dry signal. And as my reverb engine is actually closed right now, if I'm closing it, I'm basically, removing the dry, the direct sound. So let's talk about this reverb engine. A reverb engine creating early, cluster and tail, basically, it's a 3-part reverb engine. The early reflection, everything's being synthesized there. But the early content is very interesting, and number one can be controlled. We can control what we're generating. If you've got content, that we're receiving that already has some early reflection in it, you can actually kill the early if you want. But the great thing about the early, and that's the one I like to talk a lot, is the fact that these basically early reflection are being localized with the source. So what do I mean by this? Well, let's try to listen to it. Put more level. You guys should actually have picked up, some little early reflection there. If you could hear basically as I'm pan on one side, you could hear, the little early reflection, the first reflections on the right side, you could hear some of it. And that's exactly what the early reflection does. And why do we, localize these early? Because they help you localize sound, They help you localize, they basically bring a sense of reality into your mix. Great use, even for live, when someone may be concerned with, thinking, well, the room already has reverb. Yeah, I get, the room may already have reverb. But the reverb engine becomes interesting exactly for this. And when you're building something in a studio production, obviously, this is potentially replacing the artistic reverb that you've been using. Because our intent now is to actually create a space. You're creating a space. We're not going to spend too much time in the reverb engine. I'll let you guys appreciate. But this is the reverb engine that we have. Every single room have a reverb engine. Okay. Back to the perceptual factors. Of our system. Add the cluster here. You're probably picking up the tail now. Okay, so that's the room presence actually. I'm basically now, I've just been playing with the second setting, the setting called room presence, and this is basically, elevating the tail, the tail of our source. We're going to leave it at this for now. We can spend quite a bit of time on perceptual factors, appreciate the presence, your direct, the room presence, your tail. 2 settings, running reverberance and envelopment, the feeling of envelopment. So basically playing on some of the parameters of the reverb engine. And another one to mention here is the pan reverse here, pan rev. And pan rev is a way to localize as well your cluster. Okay. So instead of having a diffuse cluster, like the tail is completely diffused, to be able to localize their cluster. Okay, let's close that reverb engine for the second. Let's bring back that source at the center. Okay, I've been playing with the object in the space like this because it's kind of nice to do. Just grab it and put it wherever you want. But you could be doing this on the parameters right there. Radiation versus position. There are the two that I've talked about, playing on the X, on the Y, and on the Z. Then you don't see the Z, well, you see it move somewhere, but if you appreciate the Z, let's go on that view. Right. All right, so the elevation of the actual source. Other settings of the radiation portion is the yaw. Is the source pointing at me or no? Look at the source that's spinning around. Wow, and you can appreciate it in your ears, I guess. All right, you're getting the filtering if the source was not pointing at you, and it would have basically, more, if your reverb engine is enabled, obviously, it will basically, fill the room more because the source, there's no less direct sound of it. So the yaw, the pitch, the aperture is basically, are you exciting more the room or you're not? Very interesting, Anyway, you can play with this at your own pace. And the position, as I was saying, the X, Y, Z. So we've got azimuth here, which is the 360 degree, all right? You got the elevation aspect, and last but not least, the distance. Now, the distance is something that I really want to take the time to talk about, because the distance and the loss of amplitude is determined, which is, it's a standard 6 dB drop factor, doubling the distance, typical from law, and there's a drop factor, you can modify this. But the point is that this signal starting to drop, it's because my radius is at, that particular, my source is sitting at the radius right now. So as I start, I depart, if you want, this is basically where my signal, starts to drop. If I actually was to increase the radius, so you understand the concept, you'll see no signal variation in the bubble. So when you're in the bubble, there's no longer a signal variation. The departure is here, okay? Your drop, it becomes there. Anyway, important to understand if you're doing custom speaker arrangement or just as an overall concept. So basically, often we're going to be putting the sources at, we're just going to be starting, to put the sources here. When you're in the bubble, the actual panning still applies, the angles, but the actual, signal won't drop. It's just equity signal here, okay? Just want to make sure this is clear. We may gonna have some question later or not. Let's just scroll here. The spread factor, is basically you spreading the width of the source. We've got rotation, and rotation and scale is actually practical because when we've got a multi-channel source, a mono one, we wouldn't get that, but we've got multi-selected, because we currently haven't multi-selected, but you can multi-select sources, shift, choosing multiple sources. You can obviously scale them together as a group, or if you're dealing with a multi-channel source, like right now we're dealing with a stereo source, I can scale it, I can rotate it, I can basically do whatever I want with it. And all this is all fully automatable, by the way, so you can have a movement, a spinning movement at one point. Oh, hey guys, I've been looking at my computer. That's what I do because I'm trying to explain you things. And we're just going to be, basically your other settings, that are maybe not as, I say this, early width can be interesting, but the radius is the one to keep in mind. I want you as well to appreciate polar and Cartesian. There's 2 coordinate modes, and they're very important from an actual perspective, a multi-channel source, because you see when you do the movement here, the source will actually going to kind of keep a relationship, right? They're on the polar. They're kind of following a polar pattern. But if I'm actually, let's just actually switch to the, can you switch to the PowerPoint? Actually, you're going to basically be seeing what the differences are. Okay, so you see right now the differences of what, a movement in polar versus a movement in Cartesian, how, a multi-channel source behave. Important to know if you're starting to build some automation, by the way, I like to mention it. Voila for source properties. I think we've covered some of it anyway. We'll keep some for some questions anyway. We can actually, how are things going, guys? I haven't spoken with you for a long time. How did you have a room and speaker arrangement that's focused on one audience for Cirque du Soleil? Okay. Yeah, maybe Nicolas, Jean-Louis, you want to give me a little feed here to see how things are going. We're not going to take questions right away. Just wanted to make sure we're all good and the audio level is comfortable and you're kind of seeing what I'm doing. I have to wait a bit for the delay of the response. Hugo. No answer. It's very good. Nicolas. You're nice. Everything is great. En français? Oh, you know what? You know what? We have quite a community from France today, so I should say bonjour à tout le monde qui sont en France et à Montréal aussi. We have some people live in Montreal from the French community. On va dire un petit bonjour aux gens de la France qui se sont joints à nous aujourd'hui. Je crois qu'on a même presque 15-20% de la population des enregistrements qui sont... Donc, vous allez voir mon petit accent québécois aussi en même temps pour vous saluer. So, let's get back to it. Everything is great. Jean, you see, English. Jean-Louis, a little one for you. Everything is great is no good. Everything. That's the thing with the French when they try to speak English. Same thing for me. I hope you're not being too offensive with my French-Canadian accent and some of the weird things that I say. Okay, we're going to take questions later anyway on some of the source aspects. Let's get into virtual rooms and our actual... Maybe we want to just change the camera position a bit for the slide, but anyway, that's okay. We're going to be talking about, these virtual rooms. We've already covered them, so we can go in this fairly rapidly. So what do they mean? What these various rooms means? Well, they basically mean, various stream type. I want to render a channel base. I want to render an HOA or ambisonic, because we do deal with ambisonic as well. I want to, be, delivering a binaural. So multiple stream times. That's why multi-room are very practical. For other people, many rooms can mean multiple acoustic spaces, right? One room is a long verb, a short verb. So you're basically putting, sources are living in a different world, acoustic space-wise. It could be various applications. You've seen it from a Cirque perspective or a typical theatrical maybe perspective. One room for localization. One may be a zone, a bubble. It could be a specific map, a space map, if you want, in some way. Mapping, creating some virtual speakers, for you to be able to do pretty much anything you want. And then what various panning method can mean is panning types, right? Maybe you want to have two panning types. Maybe VBAP panning time works better for some sources, where DBAP, a non-sweet spot centric strategy would be better for others. Maybe for localization is in DBAP, where VBAP will be, be more for, whatever. Anyway, you get the concept, I hope. Virtual room, stream type. Well, what can we do with these virtual rooms and the stream type? Well, we can basically, and we'll look at the long list of channel-based systems. So in channel-based, we're talking about, you obviously, speaker arrangements in 2D and in 3D. We fully support 3D. Part of this as well is mid-side potential binaural B format, which is an ambisonic format, B format, or first order. Ambisonic, or obviously all the way to 7th order, I order ambisonic, that we can actually deal with stream type wise. So we can deliver, we can bring those deliverables to the table with the various stream type. And just to make a quick parenthesis of, the binaural, binaural audio, for the ones that are not familiar with it, basically is us, rendering 3D audio, content over headphones, like you're all doing, or maybe some of you are doing. If things are sounding weird at your place and you're listening to it on speakers, well, that would explain why. It's not compatible. The only thing that would be compatible to try to give you binaural on speakers would be using transaural. We have a way to do this, but don't want to get into transaural too much. But basically, using binaural synthesis, sound can be positioned wherever we want, and around the listener. And that's the thing with binaural. And that synthesis basically is either us putting sources, or when we're in binaural preview, is us listening to the speakers, the 2, the 7, the 8, the 7.1, the Atmos, the 22.2. All these sources are being synthesized to provide me a preview. And that's the concept of the preview. Binary audio is not something that, it's basically look at it as something encoded. In some ways, but on headphones, render, and then we'll talk about HRTF later. But we do have this concept of compensation for near field effect as well. And as I was saying, you can see it on the right side of the image here is actually you taking a binaural room and using our transcoder to transcode it to transaural, okay, which is something that you would want to do over a speaker arrangement if you're trying to do, transaural. So let's just talk about HRTF quickly. I don't want to go too deep into this, but HRTF stands for Head-Related Transfer Function, and that's basically a mathematic model for actually the filtering that needs to, the filtering that is caused by actually our physical, our ear or ear size, and torso, and all this is basically changing the way we perceive sound. If I remove my my headphones right now, I'm listening to the room, my torso, my whole top body will basically determine how I listen sound. And that's where, ArchFTF plays a role. As I was saying, someone asked the question, what are you doing if you go for ArchFTF? We're doing KMR, which is a generic one. But if you really, really want to, to bring this to the next level, the ideal way is actually to get your own personalized HRTF. We call them these SOFA files that we can import. As I was saying, generic KMR, but it plays a significant role in the way we localize. So the generic, will work for most people. I think I did in the beginning, front and back. And some people may have picked up the back. I was picking up okay. We were on a generic. Obviously with the, things like the back and some of the elevation would definitely render better if, with a specialized or personalized HRTF. There's various ways to get HRTF. I don't want to talk about it too much right now. We're actually working with Genelec. We just started to evaluate. They've got this oral ID system, pictures of your ears, and they can provide a file, which you can import in Spat. More to come if you're following the channels. Talking about the channels, as a quick parenthesis, we're just about to release a Facebook group of the Immersive Consulting Group to actually kind of take some questions live and get the community to share some of the things. And in the meantime, we've got the newsletter, the monthly newsletter that talks about some things, and we are planning to do some things with the oral ID from Genelec. But anyway, basically, point is, getting personal ArchFTF is something to consider if you're going to be mixing in binaural. That's really the point of the conversation if you don't want to remain in a generic one, which would work, but is generic. Quick parenthesis on ambisonic. Again, we're not going to go in deep in ambisonic, and I'm not going to plan to talk about it. More to say that we support ambisonic, B format, or I order ambisonic from two perspectives, from creating a stream or from actually transcoding actual ambisonic in. I've got a third order ambisonic a studio sent me, and I want to transcode it to a channel-based arrangement that I want to re-spatialize. Okay, I want to spatialize over. So that's really what you can do with ambisonic. It's transcoded to a channel base, or ultimately you can create ambisonic content to deliver to someone, which they'll transcode on that arrangement. Don't want to deal too much with this. We're probably going to cover this in a future session anyway. Yeah, okay, we can jump on the computer quickly as we move along here. Let's just do that quickly. And what I really want to do here is I'm just going to select a room, and I want you to appreciate. We have this live? Yeah, we do. I want you to appreciate the inspector as I select a room. And this is where the actual stream time gets configured. So if I take a room, I see channel base. You may not see it too much, but channel base, I order ambisonic, binaural, mid-side, and B format, which are my 5 different stream type. That I can deal with. Speaker arrangement that you saw, if you're in channel base, you're obviously going to have the speaker arrangement and the panning type, which we're going to disclose in 2 seconds, okay? And then obviously if you're in I order ambisonic, you've got the dimension of, and then so on and so forth. So depending which room type, HRTF when you're in binaural, and so on and so forth. Maybe as we're speaking about the room, you may want to appreciate the tracking ear. Tracking ear is for black tax only currently, which is basically, this real-time tracking system primarily used. Some people use it in broadcast for that matter of fact, but it's primarily used in live concert. They've done some gaming things as well. So I can actually latch the ID of a tracking device to the head in binaural or to the listening reference, the point. If I want to do some tracking of the listening perspective, okay? And so on and so forth. I got a little gain in the actual output level meters of that actual room. So yeah, let's go back to our spatialization techniques right now. Let's just move back to the actual, exactly, thank you. Now, as I was saying, we're basically, we've got, spatialization technology, and we've got these panning methods as well, because as we're going to be choosing an actual channel-based arrangement, for example, we'll have to choose the speaker arrangement and obviously, ultimately, the panning type. So we've got multiple of these, panning methods, amplitude intensity-based panning. We'll talk about right now about this question of, a sweet spot or sweet spot-centric systems, which the question came up. And yeah, indeed, we've, from a studio perspective anyway, and from a production perspective, we've been used to, delivering 5.1, 7.1, Atmos. All these speaker arrangements are actually based around what? Well, they're based around, someone listening a sweet spot, And in live shows, we can actually manage to use sweet spot centric. If we design a system properly, we can get a quite large sweet spot zones. But you're totally right that this sweet spot centric approach, when you're closer from the speaker, it breaks apart. And that's not just a live scenario, it's just sweet spot centric. methods that actually will break apart as you're closer to speaker. You're not getting, you're not being immersed on it, So we'll talk about this. But there's other panning tools for the non-sweet spot centric. DBAP and KNN are potentially these two. Wave field synthesis will obviously be another one. And obviously, we've talked about the spatialization, the binaural synthesis and the binaural preview, which are part of, the spatialization technology. The binaural synthesis to create a binaural feed, or the binaural preview to listen to the channel base or to the output of something to preview, to synthesize the channels. And then wave field synthesis, as I said, to be coming. Okay, in the panning techniques right now, let's look at them. You could dive into software and you can appreciate, if you're actually in your software right now, right? If you go, and you're on a channel-based arrangement, you have the panning and you've got some various pannings that are right there. But let's go back to the slideshow, but you guys can do this at home while I'm speaking anyway, if you're on the inspector of the room, right? You've got these angular type panning method, pairwise panning. In 2D, if you are in 2D arrangement anyway, and then you've got the vector-based VBAP and VBIP that works for 2D and 3D arrangement. We've got the distance-based, the DBAP, again in 2D and 3D. The KNN, which is not fully a panning method, we'll talk about it because it's practical for live performances or for various things anyway. And two others, speaker placement, correction, amplitude panning, which I think we may be removing if it hasn't been removed yet. And the other one is the ambisonic equivalent panning. Not going to go in all of them. There's a lot of things to talk about. Let's just talk about some of the important ones and some of the concepts. So basically, VBAP, BBIP, it's an extension of our stereo amplitude panning, but it's just applied on multiple speakers. And like stereo, when you're sitting at the center, right, you've got that phantom. We'll look at it in the image in 2 seconds. So basically, what we've got there is that, exploded on a multi-speaker arrangement. And then the panning law, the panning law will basically do what? Well, it will basically, use the closest speaker of the source to actually, create that sense of localization. We're going to be looking at this. VBAP and VBIP, for example, sweet spot centric, it means you're surrounding the listener, on a 2D or on a 3D. And 2D would be a ring, and 3D would be an actual sphere, half sphere, right? Around the audience, which is a typical approach for an HQ.2 or an Atmos or all the formats, formats that we know, which is obviously not always applicable to live, for example, as we said before. And obviously, we assume that the listeners are in that sweet spot zones anyway. It's not necessarily one person. Don't get me wrong, we don't. It doesn't mean that we can't use VBAP. It's not just for one guy in a room. Chances are that, there's a good group around that will get this. And the experience will overall be great for a lot of people. But yes, the extremes are always, they're breaking apart some of, what you've built for sure. Quick on this. Hey, this is it, right? 2 speakers, left and right. You've got the source, basically that's get position in your angle in front of you. Well, that becomes a virtual speaker. End of conversation, right? And then, you can explode this in 2D and 3D. And in 3D, what becomes interesting is beyond this, 2 speaker, you've got a third speaker. And that's why we often talk about active triangles when we're designing a system, a custom system that will be using sweet spot centric approach. We're typically going to be trying to build those triangles. The disadvantage of not building triangles like this, and unfortunately, some of our arrangements out there that exist, standards are actually not necessarily based around that. But when you're actually going, you're not doing this, you're basically ending up with some zones where you can't put the source. So you're putting a source, but it's misfiring. Yes, it's misfiring. Thank you. I'm back, Guy. So you're basically, going to be hitting some zone with the source where, it's not going to get localized properly. So I call this a misfire, from a localization perspective. So you look at the sphere, I'm building those triangle. That's what an NHK 22.2 and many of those sphere type systems. That's that's kind of what's going on the panning per se. And as you move the source, and when you have a nice triangle, well, you'll get the very smooth transition throughout. We've got a little amplitude curve here. I don't think it's necessary, just for you to appreciate the red and the blue line, where VBAP and standard angular panning method are pretty much exactly the same. VBIP, which is intensity based, which appears to render potentially better in higher frequency, above 700-800, not high frequency really, but let's get 1K and up. render better. But what I want you to appreciate is amplitude type curve or VBAP curve is very similar, if not the same. So the red and the blue, okay? Okay, let's move to 2D sorry, not 2D, 2D, 3D, but in DBAP now. So what we've got basically with DBAP is, it's an alternative panning method, which is more of a matrix-based, we like to call it, to support irregular speaker systems. Or not just irregular systems, but I should say systems where the listener can be located anywhere. You're doing a museum experience, for example. People are going to be walking along corridors, their speakers, they're spread apart. 40-meter speakers spread here and small, smaller distance other places. There's no regularity. There's nothing uniform about your arrangement. Chances are the DBAP is going to serve you better, where VBAP is just going to be a nightmare to try to localize anything anyway. KNN could be used as well for that. So it extends the principle of equal entity panning from pair of speakers, but just on many speakers. And the other thing that's important to understand with DBAP, sorry, back to the camera, to understand with DBAP is that the actual, how can I explain this rapidly? Well, first of all, it makes no assumption of where the listeners are located. So there's no link. I mean, basically, what establishes the amplitude is the source, and the speaker location to that source, right? There's no, the listener, forget about the listener. Actually, for that matter of fact, if you go in a KNN room or in a DBAP room in Spat, you'll see that there's no listening ed. And that's really just to kind of give you, well, you see it there on the KNN, for example, there's no ed contrary to a VBAP. And why is this? It's basically, and there's no longer, a circle around, but it's a grid, or basically grid matrix. We're kind of, out of this amplitude style panning, okay? I want you to understand this in DBAP or in KNN, there's no longer a concept of an ed. It's irregular setups, really, that's what it is. Okay, back to the PowerPoint here. So there's an amplitude weighting that's going on based on the distance, of virtual source in each loudspeakers. Okay, and that's what's going on with DBAP, without getting into too much detail. And last but not least, KNN, which I love to use because KNN is an amplitude panning over a undefined number of neighbors, and that number of neighbors gets defined by you. So as soon as you actually, let's go back to the Spat, for example. Let's just go back to Spat, my Spat computer, please. Are we there? Yeah, we are. Remember earlier when I did this move here and we were previewing a KNN room and I was spinning around and you could hear the jumps. Well, the jumps comes from a simple settings that's right here. It's called the neighbors. And the neighbor percentage is only there in the KNN room, and that allows you to define by percentage per source and fully automatable. And that's why it's very powerful for a show, theatrical show integration. That by percentage, basically, you can decide to how many speakers the signal is going to lock. So look at it as a spread. It's a spreading method. Hey, it's too localized. You increase the percentage, it's going to lock to more speakers around it. We love it. I love it for theatrical shows. You can automate this setting. Say, hey, right now that source is too localized. Open it up, open the percentage, and you get the closest neighbors. It's actually raining on my head. It's not the first time. Can you actually see on the screen, on the camera, some water? There's actually water falling from the studio. That's lovely. On a rack on top of it, but whatever. Fun, fun, fun. Confinement, guys, there's no workers, no one's repairing anything here. Just kidding. Just want to appreciate the KNN, an interesting approach. Let's just go back to the slideshow quick, please, Guy. Thank you. So basically, the distance between the virtual sources. So you still, there's distance, obviously, between these 2, 3, 4, 5 sources, and it's defined by percentage. Simple, 10 speakers, 1 to 10% is 1 speakers, 10 to 20% is 2, and so on and so forth. You're dividing, basically, the number of speakers, and that's what, gets used. Okay, good. We're moving along. Yeah, it's taking longer than expected. Hopefully, you guys are enjoying, but we're getting into some more interesting conversations anyway. Channel-based speaker arrangement here. Let's just go back on the slideshow. So you appreciate that as you were, in your room inspector. They were speaker arrangement, and there's a long list of them, and my list is longer than yours, and that has to do with because I've got a bunch of custom speaker arrangement that we don't necessarily, you need to have a look at right now. But really, what I want you to concentrate on is all these predefined arrangement: mono, stereo, LCR, and then quad, 7.1, 5.1, cube, Atmos, Oro, MPEG, Demi-Sphere, NHK, and so on and so forth. There's a long list of predefined arrangement. These arrangements are, we call it normalized. We'll talk about speaker configuration. Means they're all sitting at the 2 meter line. And that means what? That means that your radius that's a 2 meter means as soon as you start to, the source default position is on the speaker line. As you start to move, you know, you get some distance. And if you're obviously playing with the angle, you know, the azimuth, we call it, of the source, well, you basically got it rotating, you know, over the speaker arrangement. You know, so these are all the predefined. They can be edited. You can duplicate them. You know, we'll look at this in speaker arrangement. But these are there. They're for you. They're ready to roll. You just, you know, pop it. Want that Canon one to be LRS? Well, there it is. And if I open it, there it is. You know, LRS speaker arrangement in 2 seconds. Okay, on the 2 meter line again. Okay. And so on and so forth. And then you can do any custom speaker arrangement. So these are custom speaker arrangement. Well, this was, and then this one I just removed it, but whatever, it was a custom arrangement. Yeah, I don't need to bring it back, but I think we could bring it back probably quickly. Cirque all main, I think that's the one, yeah. Voila. No, that's not the one. But anyway, whatever, you get the concept. These are custom speaker arrangement, and it sits nicely on the overlay. Okay, good. Speaker configuration now. Speaker configuration, you know, is that ability to create those custom arrangements. I'm going to keep this for later, but you can get to there. You can get to there as you're actually in the inspector. If you press edit, well, you've got all these speaker arrangement. If you press the edit button, you basically are bringing the speaker configuration window where you can actually start to edit. I could live edit this. This is a custom arrangement. I can change the position, and you can see live. All right. Oh, the speaker just moved, and that's because I've changed it. Okay, as simple as this. Voila. And that's the speaker arrangement, the custom. We'll get into this. And this actual room view. That we have, well, you can actually, when you get into a room, right, there's an overlay. Well, this is actually here. If you actually click the setup, the output section, you know, I was talking earlier about, you know, tracking the listener. Well, this is all the coordinates, 6D, 6DOV, sorry. You know, so to actually move the listening when needed anyway. But here we have all the output, the channels, you know, that are part of our arrangement. If you touch them, you actually see them in blue, kind of highlighted on the arrangement. We can still get to the edit, the speaker arrangement right there. But this is our list, and this is our overlay. If I actually clear the overlay, you know, I can basically, you know, select an overlay, up, PNG file, can scale it up and down. That needs a bit of work sometimes, you know, to scale it properly, but once you figure out some of the tricks there, you can rapidly do this. So you can basically, you know, it's just an overlay. Okay, module 2 in questions. Time is flying. We've got, well, we started at 9:15, so we've got an hour and a half. It's not bad, actually. We'll give you more talk on your panner and panning, please. Let's go some question. Will you give more talk on your panner and panning, please? Okay, well, I'm ready to talk more about this. Maybe we can formulate this as specific questions. Right now, what we have done on the actual panning per se is we've explored, you know, the sweet spot centric. You know, in the list, you know, of panning methods, you probably have seen, angular panning, which is just a standard, you know, panning like stereo panning that you're used to. When we're playing it in VBAP, we're obviously extending this to multiple speakers, and we are here in a sweet spot centric, you know, strategy. Let's see, we've got questions coming in. Is there hardware already to automate spats? Not sure. Yeah, well, is there hardware already to automate spat? Not sure I get fully the question. To automate spat, I mean, if you're thinking about, you know, controlling these objects, we can obviously talk about Lemur controller with OSC. So we have some templates, some new ones that we're about to release with Lemur controller. We can talk about, QLab templates, obviously, which is basically some OSC generic, generic cues using. So the messaging, the OSC messaging, by the way, is available in the software. We'll look at it later when we get to the preferences. Well, not later, like now in a few seconds when we're done with the questions. I don't know if that's exactly, is there, yes, thank you, camera. Yeah, but I'm looking at my phone too. Guy, come on. Can I take some water, Guy? Do I have the permission to take water? Yes? You're gonna cut this at the mix? Can you put some reverb on my vocal? See me? That's me, huh? I have the button. Okay. What would it be possible to choose one panning type per source without creating no? Is that the right answer, Nicolas? Would it be possible to choose one panning type per source without creating a room? No. The answer is no. The room, sources are using the panning. And as I was saying, earlier, sources are agnostic of the output arrangement. Sources are living in the space, they have properties, and obviously the room parameters and the inspector of the room, the stream type and the panning type is what defines what's going on the panning. So no, if that's the question. Any other questions on this? We're gonna go on about, preferences right now, how to set up the preferences, and then we're gonna go in the blocks. I'm gonna bring blocks together. I'm giving us another 15 minutes to be actually, happy with a session together, creating from scratch. I'm gonna show you some little tricks. We still have a lot of people online. Or maybe everyone left. Maybe I'm by myself in the studio with Guy and Jean-Loup and Nicolas. I hope there's some of you that are appreciating what we're trying to deliver today. But feel free to ask questions before I jump to the next section. Nicolas' quiet, Jean-Loup's quiet. It sounds to me like, you know what? Maybe a question will pop up at the end anyway. So let's move on. Oh, Jean-Loup is writing with some delay. Well, you know what? No, there is 150 watchers. Well, thank you for confirming. So there's still some people alive. Yeah, it's quite good. Quite good. Audio guys, I hope. I'm just kidding. Gotta be funny. No more question right now. Look at that. Huh. Look at that. And even the big boss is looking. Well, let me salute my friend Gael. Since the beginning, he's a patient man, software developer, our lead developer, ed developer, the father actually of Spat Revolution is online, Gael, saying a quick hello, and he's been watching and listening to me for close to 2 hours. He's probably going to tell me, Hugo, you've been talking way too much, and I know it, and I knew it would come, but there's just great things to talk about, and we can't just skip everything to make a fast track, It's important to understand some of the base concept for you to navigate properly. So, hello, Gael. Hello. So, where are we? Let's deploy that baby. Let's deploy that Spat Revolution. Okay, we'll get back into question if there's other things that pops up. Okay, so the deployment of it, we'll be looking at the Spat Revolution engine per se, some of the hardware requirements just to kind of, get some flagship going on how to set this up. And then we'll configure the application, the OSC, and we'll look at, binaural HRTF management. We'll probably skip this, no time, and we'll go straight in the processing block and doing a bit more custom speaker arrangement rapidly anyway, okay? Let's boot this together, guys. Thank you for watching on this long session. So, Spat Revolution basically runs on Windows or Mac computers. Currently, no Linux build, well, unless Gael, my friend, tells me that he's gonna make a Linux build this afternoon. But as it currently stands, we've got Windows and Mac computers, supported by Spat, standalone application, and we're using the multicore, the power of today computers to actually process the source objects, and the spatialization. Multi-core device is greatly appreciated to do this. And the I/O capacity, the session size and the latency is really limited by your hardware. So we're not proposing an hardware solution here. It's a software base. So it is part of the integrator, the consulting, or whomever is involved in deploying to actually do their own work from an integration perspective. We are providing some recommendation. I've got some, at the end. But the advantage of being, in an environment where, ASIO or core audio lives, it means that I can bring any input and at any sample rate, right? You want to do 192K input? Yeah, most probably on the limit number of channel, but you can. We have a reverb engine that could function there. So is at 96. And I could even say 384 unless Gael pings me, say, yeah, don't try 384, it's not going to work. But I haven't tried it. But for that matter of fact, any sample rate supported. any sample rate, supported by that local interface, can come in and come out. So local or network audio. And the network audio, don't look at it strictly from an actual live sound thing. Oh, that's for the live sound. And that's not the case. You can look at it from, your Pro Tools computer spinning out Dante or AVB audio down to the control, to the computer room where you've got one or maybe two Spat computers receiving these sources in network audio, and you sending the automation from your Pro Tools or your DAW, right? So that's the network audio. It's just basically, it's a network system. It's a production system. That's what we're talking here. It's not just for live and the Dante of the live world, for example. Okay, and then we've got the Spat plugin, which is very important to understand. Basically what it does, it brings the local audio, so it brings local or remote integration. What do we mean by this? Is when you're local, the Spat plugin brings your automation, so all the automation and parameter. And number two, it brings the audio potentially. We've got this local audio path option, okay? And why do I say remote integration is, as I was just saying, we can go in a network type system where the audio is distributed in network audio, but then the Spat plugin is able as well to send all the automation network. Okay, we're going to use this, talk about this in an advanced session of integration, but the concept is that these parameters that you've got on the Pro Tools and whatever are being pushed on the network, and OSC for that matter of fact, for the one that cares to know what's going on. So, your system can migrate from a local, one computer, two applications, Spat and the DAW, and some automation created to a network of devices, and not strictly from a live perspective, from a production perspective as well, okay? And that's pretty much it. Multiple format. We do AX native and DSP. The DSP version is not for audio. It's really for control. Well, that's true. It is for audio as well, but in the DSP version for S6L console is strictly for control. Important to understand. AU, VST, various format. It's a big project. The integration has been a challenge from the beginning. Some people when I'll be online say, yeah, I've been trying with that DAW, it's not working. There's some, there's the reason we're just releasing some tutorial. There's some guidelines to follow, some routing, some DAW acts one ways, others acts another ways as far as when they process, plug in, and so on and so forth. The local audio integration can somehow become challenging. What do we recommend? Well, we've got alternatives, right? We could use loop back audio. We can use various other audio routing, solution between application, or we can move to network audio for that matter of fact, if that's, not working to us. So, but the local audio path is something that we've decided early on we wanted to do just to ease. You saw the integration. I opened Pro Tools, the sources appear at Spat, you connect them, you open the template, you're go. That's powerful. But then there's obviously some challenges that comes with just, dual application and synchronization. Anyway, you ought to take time to test your setup, okay? Just wanted to cover this. Let's talk about these requirements quickly because they're important to mention. Don't, try with a 10-year-old computer to do, 64 channel 96K, big session, 3-room binaural. It's not going to work. It's going to clip. It's going to, you're definitely going to be having some issues there. So basic requirements is typically, if you're doing the DAW and the Spat on the same computer, try to keep, your input, to 64 mono or 32 stereo maximum. You'll probably going to limit yourself to 48K. If you're going to go above that, you'll definitely want to consider maybe reducing. And then as far as virtual rooms, I would say, keep it to 2 or 3 virtual rooms. If not trying to do 5, 6, 7, 8, keep in mind every single room, gets treated independently, and every single room has a reverb engine, and every single sources in the room has local, early reflection localized with the source. So if you start to do the math, there's quite a bit of processing needed. The other thing I would say, for most computers, try to limit it to USB or Thunderbolt, audio hardware, which will actually not going to put as much pressure as network audio. If you're starting to do network audio, being AVB, being AES-67 or Dante, you're putting pressure on your core, to deal with this from a processing perspective. Definitely, you want to probably, keep this from, from a machine that has, better performances than what I'm showing here. And then, any, iCore, 5, i5, i7, i9, whatever, 3 gig, type machine, 8 gig, 6 gig, or better, will typically, give you rendering. But the key of the magic in this integration, for various reasons, but one, the fact that you've got this 3D room that you can spin, it's a 3D graphic engine, style, plus you've got 2 applications running, needs a graphic resources, you definitely want to consider to have a dedicated graphic card. Some of the laptops, the MacBook Pros have this. Some, MacBook Air don't necessarily have this. They're using the CPU, to actually do give you graphic resources. That will come and fight, in the resources that we all need to, to build this prescient engine. I hope you guys get it. More questions, feel free to ask them. And, if not, our support department can answer some of these. But important to take time to do your proper hardware qualification. Let's just say it this way. Okay. So actually, we're going to be jumping to Spat to actually talk about core and ISO audio, local to network, block size, and buffer. Just rapidly, we are in Spat right now. We close this session. Let's hit the preference page. I'm not going to go through everything. Hardware input. This is my hardware. Right now, I'm connected to you guys with an Army Digiface AVB audio devices. This is what is feeding you today. But I've got a Dante virtual sound card actually connected right now, and a Digiface as a USB device and an aggregate and 2 aggregates device. And these are the core audio that can bring in. And if you actually click the external sample rate, basically as you're going to be changing this device, the sample rate is going to follow whatever sample rate that that device has. This is you here manually changing this. 300, 480, 480. Yes, I knew it was possible. Block size, very important. We are recommending, for example, with Pro Tools 1024, which has seemed to render and be fairly stable. It will be important as well that this block size setting is exactly the same as the DAW. If not, block size means what? Means the actual latency. Right now, you see quite a bit of high latency. For whatever reason, I'm on the iNetwork buffer. If you do, Dante audio or, with just DVS, or if you're doing, typical, network audio, you'll sometimes have high latency as well, unless you've got, anyway, you've got to watch for that portion. What you're seeing on the bottom is the total latency. Spat does not ingest latency more than the actual buffer that you put it. So as I'm going to change this buffer live, if I bring it to 128, I just dropped to 8 milliseconds of latency. Now there's a mismatch with Pro Tools, but the point was just to show you that that's what it does. Okay, the latency, very important aspect of configuring. I'm not going to spend time here. I'm not going to spend time here. Here, just to show you that by default, the OSC is disabled. You can enable it. As simple as this. The command log, which will take extra resources, is for you to actually log for debugging. Let's not talk about this. But if you are interested in exporting the parameters of the OSC, if you export that file, we'll give you all the dictionary, okay? The complete OSC dictionary for the one that would like to program that kind of stuff. Maybe 80% of our crowd right now is like, I don't care, I'm never going to program OSC. And you don't need to deal with this OSC. If you're strictly using Spat with the DAW, you don't need to set any connections per se. This is as soon as you're moving to a remote scenario, dual machine, dual application, you're expanding the system. But as a DAW configuration, with the Spat plugin, there's no need to actually deal with this. But anyway, just briefly, you basically have 6 connection slots, and they are either inputs, outputs, and you see right now I've got an input, and this is 127.0 address is what we call loopback, and that loopback allows me to do what? That was my QLab, guys. When I was firing movements in QLab, that was basically QLab docking on the port number 53700, okay? So this is basically our OSC connection that, we're not going to get into HRTF, but this is how you manage and import HRTF files, which we've been luckily importing the Genelec oral ID recently, which will come with some information. Okay, that's it for now. Now let's go back to actually, so you know how to enable it, configuring the hours. I did not spend too much time in the OSC. We'll keep this for deeper integration anyway. Let's talk about these processing blocks because they're quite important. If I do get send return right now, you see there's a processing block that happens, and that's because of the software I/O. But let's remove this right now, and if I select it, I've got the remove selected. Right now I'm on the space, on an empty space. I think the input are very straightforward to understand. They're by default hardware input. Because software input, they come automatically. Get, send, return, these are software input. Not to mix, by the way. Don't try to mix hardware and software input. That's going to be a synchronization nightmare for sure. So we typically don't want to be, you're either going full, send and returns or full hardware in and out. Don't try to mix both environments. Although you may have seen me do it earlier, not recommended. Okay, so basically these are the sources, that are coming in, and you can change what they are, their arrangement per se. Okay, there are various stream type as well. Bringing in ambisonic, bringing channel based. When in channel based, you can define the speaker arrangement. And why is there a speaker arrangement in input? Well, yeah, you can bring in a 5.1, a 7.1. Now let's just do it quickly. Let's just remove that one here. let's just, change that mono input here to actually let me bring an Atmos. Whatever, I just picked up an Atmos. So I've got 4 mono inputs, 1 Atmos. You can see, if I can take the lasso approach and just grab a bunch of things, on the screen. Input transcoder, we're not going to bother too much about it. The input transcoder is really when you are with something like what? Well, like Ambasonic, to transcode to to an actual channel-based arrangement to be able to specialize it, okay? We're not gonna concentrate on this today. This is advanced type stuff. Sources, we could manually add them, but the beauty is we don't even need to do this because Spat is gonna be great for us. We've got inputs, we're defining an outputs, that we want. And if actually we select all, we do Command L, there it is. Spat created your flow from in to out. And what it did, it basically created sources, mono sources, stereo sources, by default in the stereo room, which we'll change in 2 seconds, and it created a master module for you to actually, control the volume, for example, but that's, just a master block in the old equation. That's it. If I open this room, I've got the sources. If I solo this source, I see this is the source. They're all sitting at the 2 meter line. The arrangement is at the 2 meter. We've talked about this. If I solo the 7-1, this is the 7-1 bed living on the stereo arrangement. You could say that this is a way to do down mixing in some ways. Now, what will happen with the other? Well, basically, you're basically kind of, bringing down. How would it render? Well, down mixing is another conversation. I'm not using the word down mixing more than the fact that you're respecializing. We can definitely extract and get a smaller arrangement out of this particular configuration. And now if I actually move this stereo, I go to this actual room, stereo room, and I make it an Atmos, you'll really get the concept here. If I actually open this, you've got a speaker arrangement sitting on the, an input, an Atmos sitting on an Atmos speaker arrangement. I really kind of can appreciate this right now, in the system. So I could re-specialize a 7-1 on a 7-1 output if I wanted to. Okay, so everything gets done for us. That room configuration, you don't need to do anything. Yes, you can manually add a room for the second one, selecting on it. You can use the, the command key, the shift key, the control key. Now what is it? I don't remember. I'm not tired. Is it me? Yeah, the command key, I had it right. Right, you got this, and you use the command key, and you can select the sources and the channel-based room that you just added, and you can press Connect Selected or Command L, and this will be your shortcut to do what? This is your shortcut to connect these sources to a second room. So here we are, a 7, whatever. Here, let's choose another one. Let's choose a 5, 6.0, whatever. All right, so I've got these 2 rooms now, but the sources are sitting in both. Okay. And this is basically you being able to connect these sources somewhere else. Summation, we're not going to talk too much about this because we're actually, for that matter of fact, summing, air as well. We don't even need to have summing blocks. We have the capability to take multiple rooms as long as the speaker name are the same. Again, advanced setup that I want to talk about, but we can do summing on the blocks per se. So summing master transcode, same thing on the input. This concept here is the transcode on the decode side on the output. So taking an ambisonic to an actual channel base to be able to listen to it, or being able to transcode a binaural to transaural, and so on and so forth. The master is the master. And last but not least, before we get the output, let me just show you the ability to tap. I want to tap on this 7.0 or this whatever speaker arrangement. I can actually just do Command, take the output of this master, connect it to my binaural, and connect. And here I am, a Dolby Atmos 7.2 in a binaural preview that I can preview on my headphones, okay? So this is it. This is what we've got for you guys. Little tips and tricks, the Command L for, the lasso that can be used, the Command L for connecting things together. You always have remove selected, disconnect selected, or disconnect select input or output on the right side in your inspector to kind of, deal with. So maybe start to learn these little shortcuts. Okay, good. Yay, we're doing good. We're gonna just do a quick second on speaker arrangement, and we're gonna be skipping, some of the advanced speaker arrangement. Guys, keep in mind that we wanna do an advanced session, more specific to live environment and others more specific to other environment. People from music production and music in general today are like, Hugo, I don't necessarily need to know about all these speaker arrangement customs. I've got them all, they're all there. The arrangements that you know, they're all there. You can pick them. You can slightly modify them if you want. But let me just briefly talk about this aspect quickly of, let's just go on the slideshow quickly, just so you guys understand some of the concept of the speaker arrangement anyway, which I think is important. So their standard, arrangements that are provided are, normalized, meaning at the 2 meter line, which I said, which is important from the radius perspective, number one. Number two, to create a new arrangement, you can just create new, which is an open place, and you just start to add the speaker in the location, or you can duplicate an existing, a 5-1, you duplicate it, and then you modify. Maybe, your arrangement is a bit off, or for whatever reason. Number two. Number three, this section of immersive speakers, setups, and what is practical. Well, the conversation, can go on for hours on this, and I'm going to keep this for, again, these, live scenario that we can talk about, another time. And then 2D and 3D configuration are, supported. So as soon as there's an elevation, just so you understand as a basic concept of speaker arrangement, as soon as one speaker has a tiny bit of elevation, it is considered a 3D arrangement, and you will start to have some triangulation. Let me just say one thing to the live guys out there. If we have, higher speaker on each side of a venue, a rake, right? Audience sitting in a rake, and you've got speakers, not because the speakers are higher in height, if you're looking at a 3D plan. And same from a front, if you've got two boxes and the center cluster is a bit higher, there's not necessarily a need to actually make it a 3D arrangement. We could flat everything out. This is really 2D. You always have to think about, from an audience perspective. Are these elevation, really doing something? Is it providing an elevation, to the audience? Or if it's just 1 meter difference, for example, people are not going to render anything. It is going to complexify your automation, complexify the actual triangulation. You'll get some misfiring for sure. So consider obviously going to 2D as a first step. Not saying that 3D can't be used, but meaning live anyway, it's complex. 3D means you have multiple layers with uniform, systems. A layer that has a coverage on all the audience. That's where you can think about elevation, not the single speaker above, higher. That's more speaker effects. Different conversation anyway. Okay, and normalizing can be interesting. If you do a custom arrangement, you can normalize it. And the advantage of normalizing a custom speaker arrangement would be that when you have a default position of a source at the 2 meter line, back to this conversation. So you can normalize. Let's just go back to the Spat computer. And then we go in the question. And we are getting close to the end, guys. Little thing on the integration. We're on it, just the button normalize it, just wanted to kind of cover it. That's what the normalize button do. I'm not going to talk about the compute functionality. We'll keep this for advanced speaker arrangement. Anyway, as you know, there's a lot of things we can talk about, and we'll get into the module 3 here for some questions. And we're actually going to, as I was expecting anyway, and as my friend Nicolas said, Hugo, forget about the integration. We're never going to get there. Yeah, I kind of knew that we wouldn't get deep in the integration. I'm just going to show you some quick things about the DAW integration, and we'll leave it at this for today. And then, because you're probably tired to hearing me. Yes, someone else tell me, Hugo, look at the camera. I'm looking at my phone now. Okay, talk again with your funny Canadian accent. Okay, that's Jean-Louis Nicolas. Yeah, okay, you're making fun of me. What are the advantages of Spat Revolution over Dolby Atmos Mastering Suite? Oh, uh-oh. Well, I don't think there's, you can't really just talk about, actually, was that you, Nicolas, just trying to test me here? I mean, advantages and disadvantages. I don't want to really talk about, comparing both because they're definitely not the same thing. Here, first of all, in Spat, we're there to create some spaces with acoustical simulation, number one. The thing that I can say for sure is, think about this bass bed. Would you not rather use Spat to build this interesting bed, of sources of objects instead of being in a panner, Nothing against the panner, and I understand sometimes, the panner is kind of quick to make, some rapid stems, or some rapid Atmos beds. But, the idea is that, I see Spat as literally a replacement to build that bass bed. It's a way nicer to, build a mix in, with some objects, number one. You get the acoustic simulation with this early reflection, localized. So for me, these actually are two great tools that can be used in conjunction, with each other, keeping the dynamic object of the Dolby Atmos, which is, very specific anyway to Dolby Atmos scenario. And what we're trying to, and the other thing that I can say, another advantage is that, you're not stuck to an actual speaker arrangement. You know, if your deliverable is many things, you're building the scene once for many deliverables, and that's the other major advantage. I hope I answered the question. No real questions. Wow, I've covered everything. Or guys are like, okay, enough you go. You're on the 2 hours of the training right now. I think there's someone from Dolby on the line. Maybe, you know, you can ask a question. I don't know if I explained it well, but I saw, I think, 1 or 2 names. I'll say hello to my friends from Dolby. I think my friends from friends from Genelec, sorry, are online. Anyway, many people from many, you know, companies are online, but no one has questions, so that's good. That's like, Hugo, we have enough of your funny accent. Let's just briefly, if you allow me, and for people that want to leave because they're like, okay, they're going into too much integration, and I really want to play with Spat right now. I had enough. You're actually welcome to leave. I won't be offense. Anyway, I probably won't know who you are, so I won't get offense. But if you want to stick around, I'm not going to go for long because I'm getting tired as well. It was an early 5 o'clock in the morning wake up in Montreal, and Guy here is like laughing. Who had this idea of doing an 8 o'clock broadcast? It was me. We're doing another one tomorrow. If you really want to listen to me again, you're more than welcome to come tomorrow. But just to, you know, we'll go briefly about just how to enable your DAW integration, just to add some spats in and, you know, just go back on this quick on the DAW perspective. Anyway, these advanced real-time tracking and live consoles integration, we want to cover in a specific session. There's a lot of people here that are here for music production that don't necessarily care as much, you know, about some of these subjects anyway. So it's kind of a good thing to keep them out. But we're just going to flip to a few sides. What I do want to say, though, at the same time, is we have these tutorials that are online right now. Spat integration with Reaper, 5 minutes just came out with Pro Tools. I think Pyramix system from Merging Technology just was pushed in English anyway recently. We're going to be coming with some more. Our friend Vincent is working with Logic, and he loves Logic. But you know, we're trying. We've got some of the ones made by Marcel from Yamaha, Steinberg, on the Nuendo integration. But we're going to probably make one in-house as well. So we have these tutorials that kind of explain some of the how to do this. You know, the little tricks, the dummy bus, how to force a DAW to process plugins on the inputs before it processes the output to ensure the synchronization. Little tricks here and there. It is a complex thing that we're trying to do here. But once it's set and the template is set, the beautiful thing is that you're good to go. You open the sessions and you're mixing and you're automating. This is more of a, you know, building your template and your integration. Anyway, so let's just move on to this quick. For the ones that decide to leave, you can, you know, decide to leave. And if not, I'm going to jump to Pro Tools right now anyway to look at the DAW integration anyway. So you know, quickly. And for the one that are deciding to leave, because it is more than 2 hours or on the verge anyway. It's been since whatever 5 minutes here that I'm actually talking. Thank you for actually watching, and we'll be actually pushing this video most probably live in HD format. This was unfortunately just a regular HD, not Ultra HD, so in 720p, but we'll be pushing it in higher resolution and probably make some smaller version of it. Let's just all together, for the one that is sticking for the DAW integration, just to answer some question about the plugins. So once you've installed the plugins on, you know, your, oh, thank you, Pro Tools. My key's there. Why? Too many USB-C again. So yeah, you can switch to that one. You were nice. You didn't put Pro Tools when it was showing a weird message on the screen. Thank you, Guy. Guy loves Pro Tools too. Let me just, actually, you know what? I'm going to take this from a blank, you know, from a blank session just to show you really quickly, you know. You know, what actually happens is that, you know, as soon as you basically create a track, you know, we basically, you know, you're going to be, you know, we're basically going to be adding some audio tracks, and your Spat insert becomes, you know, the magic, you know, of this integration. So you go in your plugins, you know, depending, you know, if you're actually doing, you know, you can do this on any track. So, I mean, mono, stereo, you know, multi-channels, but the Spat Revolution send here, as soon as it gets inserted, gets on the track. Now, it hasn't populated yet on Spat. I want you to understand the reason is that by default, local path is not enabled. Once you do this, you've got to remember that there is proper routing to respect, inputs and outputs. There's some the routings, and we're providing these guidelines. By the way, our support section, there's a help desk with some FAQ question. You can ask questions there. Well, you get some answers, FAQ there, plus on top of our tutorial anyway. But by default, it's not activated. But as soon as I activate it, you see the source appear in Spat, and that's it. That's all. Same things for returns. So when you have a return bus output, the same thing goes on. And if you put in Pro Tools, for that matter of fact, I'm going to stop on this one. If I do just an audio track of an ambisonic third order, for the one that gets excited with the subject of ambisonic, and if I go insert a spat send on a return, on an ambisonic, look what's going to happen when I enable it. I basically get a 16 channel, which is the maximum of Pro Tools. That's why you saw me do some crazy things for the 22.2 earlier. But this is basically me returning 16 channel to Pro Tools. Anyway, let's go back to this other slide there. We're going to wrap up on this. Again, thank you everyone for being here. It was great. I'll probably going to try to be shorter tomorrow or longer. I don't know. Hope you appreciate this session. Put your comments as well on templates that you would like to get. Say, hey, supported Flux, my scenario is Atmos and this kind of form. I'm trying to do this. What would be the template? Feel free to ask your templates. I will try to collect this information and build some templates to share in the next weeks, which would be great, to give the community some tools to start, because it's all about building a good template anyway. And then, I'm actually going to be, really jumping into, we did a little integration on Pro Tools anyway. Just going to slide this, the same kind of integration with the spats and appends on the console, which we'll cover in another session. So is the OSC generic that we could do with the digital console, for example, using the parameters, the dictionary to integrate with any generic live console that can speak OSC, for that matter of fact. Same goes on for our OSC integration with QLab that you saw today. And we've got these templates that are coming along, which are doing exactly the same thing, sending OSC to our software. And let me, this was a little black track thing. Anyway, module number 4, last question before we wrap this up. Yes, I'm going to watch the camera. Hello. Actually, my brother just showed up in the building. He's managing the building as we're in confinement. There's one person in this building really that's making sure doors are open and that water is not leaking. Oh, by the way, water is leaking on me right here. So do we have questions? Or people are probably tired of all this session. Don't forget to like. Will tomorrow content differ or the same presentation? Good question. It's going to be exactly the same content, a different group of people, different time zone, bringing in the Pacific, the West Coast. Most probably tomorrow will be better. It's not going to be that early. I'm not going to need to go to the mains room. And probably tomorrow is going to be better. No, whatever. I think it was not bad. Was it good? Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe to the channel. Indeed. Hit the bell, hit the little bell if you want. This channel that you're on right now is our channel that we're sending the tutorials, that we're sending various content on the YouTube anyway. Be ready to see about the Facebook group that we're going to be, the community group that we're going to add shortly to actually get the community and us talking at the same place. The links will be in the chat and in the description of the video. Yeah, okay. I think we're all good. Thank you, everyone. I think we did okay. I think we did okay for this first training session. Again, Hugo Larin here from Flux Immersive, live from Montreal, at where we actually been working. And thanks to our colleagues in France. And there's not only one guy, Jean-Loup, Nicolas, Francis, Vincent, even Gael, our lead developer, actually jumped today. Oh, what am I missing? Ludo and Felix as well. Felix, our customer support, Ludovic, managing our community and our marketing. And some of our branding. We're all there today to see and give me comments. So now I'm going to go to the men's room. I'm going to listen to my colleagues tell me what I did good and not good. And we're actually going to try to make this better. Thanks again. Have a great day, everyone. And be safe out there, being healthy in this confinement. We're all going to go through this. Tomorrow's going to be a better day for sure. And in the meantime, well, you know what? You've got an opportunity to dive into Spat, build yourself some sound seeds over some headphones, play with the acoustic, simulation, reverb engine, and enjoy some fun time. Get your kids on the microphone and get them to play with the reverb and positioning the source, in binaural. That's actually a very educational tool, for that matter of fact, for the ones that have kids. Anyway, thank you. It was great, seeing you today, guys. Have a great day.